نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I know we're starting a little late. Let's try that again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay, alhamdulillah. That's okay. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you all are Purdue students? Okay, alhamdulillah. How many of you all are undergraduate students at Purdue? Okay. How many are graduate students? That's me. Okay, cool. How many of you are born and raised outside the United States? That's a lot. Okay. How many of you all are parents? No, how many of you all are parents? Yeah. Okay. How many of you have parents? That's all of us. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Good. Just checking for like. All right. Well, today is about you all. And that's the reason why I started that with that introduction. Today's discussion is going to be based on your questions and your interests and your concerns and the answers that you want Ustad AbdelRahman Murphy here to talk about. Alhamdulillah, we're very thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring in Ustad AbdelRahman and his knowledge that Allah has blessed him with. And we're here to take full advantage of that knowledge for the sake of Allah to help us to be better Muslims here. So let you know a little bit more about Ustad AbdelRahman. He's a graduate of the University of Illinois at Chicago with a degree of teaching of English and religious studies, a little unique, and is currently pursuing his master's in mental health and counseling at the University of Tennessee. His passion is working with Muslims to help improve on a personal, family, and communal level. He serves as the youth minister, at the Muslim community of Knoxville, as well as the Muslim chaplain at the University of Tennessee. His Islamic studies background includes completing an Imam certificate program designed for young leaders from America and UK in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, under the mentorship and training of qualified scholars, as well as some time in Egypt. He has also completed courses in the classroom as well as individually with scholars in the United States, studying traditional texts in the U.S., traditional texts as well as contemporary issues that young Muslims face. He graduated from the Cullum Institute's full-time Islamic Studies program, studying texts with Sheikh Abdul Nasser Jungda, as many of you may have heard of him, who also teaches for Al-Maghrib Institute, and he graduated this year. Today's format is a little interesting, and that's why I'm sitting like this and I look like a talk show host, because that's what I am. Today's talk is going to be a Q&A session mostly with Brother AbdelRahman, and the questions that I'm going to ask is going to come from you all. And that's why there are note cards and pens in front of each of you. And if you run out of either, we have Sister Asma, who's raise your hand and she'll walk around with some more notepads, note cards, and pens. And we have Brother Maz back there in the back for the brothers. There you go. Okay. And so the note cards in front of you are for you to ask questions from AbdelRahman Murphy. Alhamdulillah, he has a great mixture in classical studies overseas, as well as being born and raised here, and as well as he's doing his master's in counseling. So this talk, this Q&A session, is for you all to be upfront and honest and address the real issues that you face on a daily basis, on a personal level. And all the questions are going to be anonymous. No one's going to know who wrote them. There's a lot of us here. So be upfront and honest, and inshallah, let's improve ourselves collectively for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do we have, can you grab that wireless mic? So I'm going to have an introduction here on getting to know AbdelRahman, and please fill in the note cards and the questions. Otherwise, it'll be a short night. So, yeah. Oh. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, it's just so you don't think there's anything crazy going on here. The cards will be collected by Brother Maz in the back and Asma and Nadia for the sisters. They will be collected, and she has a laptop right there. Talib has a laptop back there. And I'm on a Google document right now. And I will see the questions that they type in, and I'll go from the brother side and then the sister side and back and forth. So you will have your question answered, inshallah, by that tonight. So, AbdelRahman, welcome to Purdue.
Thanks, Bill Boilers.
Yeah. All right, great. For the cradle of quarterbacks, Drew Brees is.
Are you the? Oh, is that what you
Yeah, Drew Brees, and that's our famous.
Kyle
That's
Orton.
about it.
Kyle Orton.
Exactly, Kyle Orton. Great. Yeah. So, how are you liking Purdue so far?
It's beautiful, mashallah.
Great.
Yeah.
So, tell me about you growing up. You say you're born and raised in Chicago.
Yeah. So being born and raised in Chicago, being born and raised in Chicago, there were 3 places that you did not visit, right? Number 1 was Detroit. Number 2 was St. Louis. And then, can you not hear me? Okay. So being born and raised in Chicago, there's 3 places you did not visit. Number 1, Detroit. Number 2, St. Louis. And number 3, Indianapolis, and anywhere around it. So I was never able to come and benefit from your beautiful people, mashallah. But now I came today and I had my Blue Nile, and I feel good. So, no, it's been great, mashallah, so far. So yeah, I was born and raised in Chicago. Chicago is a very unique city, very interesting city. In my opinion, after the Haramain Sharif fame, it's obviously the best city in the world. It's very, Chicago is kind of a city that is, it has everything. Like whatever you seek from it, you will get, right? And so, that has a lot to do with my upbringing. It has a lot to do with my worldview, how I see things. And I think one thing that it allowed me to do is it gave me a lot of community experience that I wouldn't have had I grown up somewhere else. And so
a lot of folks think you're a convert.
Yeah. No, I don't have. What do you mean, you people? I don't have the honor and blessing of being a convert. I was given Islam. I didn't have the honor of choosing it. And so my dad did. My dad's a convert. My mom was Egyptian. So yeah,
And so you studied back in Egypt as well. So how do you compare? You said other than the Haram, Chicago is the best city. How do you compare, I guess, overseas and back home for a lot of us, most Purdue students here who are from overseas, and the dynamics of being born and raised in America, and how do you, having traveled back and studied, and what are your kind of conclusions or perspectives on the experience of back home versus here in America?
I think my biggest observations, and I think you guys might be able to jive with that, or how many of you have ever been to like Umrah before? Like Umrah, Hajj, mashallah. So the idea is like when you go there, you feel extremely comfortable because everyone around you, for the most part, shares your faith, or the majority of people share your faith. And they use language that you understand. They're using phrases that you understand. You can say Assalamu alaikum, they say wa alaikum salam. Whereas here, if you go to like Panera or Assalamu alaikum, they're like, that's not on the menu today. So there's kind of there's definitely a disconnect. I do think though, so I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed visiting overseas. I still enjoy it, alhamdulillah. But I think that after a certain amount of time, I begin to miss America, not because of any reason besides the fact that it's home for me, right? So, home is the place where you feel most comfortable. And I think that to some degree, after a while, I feel a little bit uncomfortable in the majority culture, where we're the majority. And because I begin to notice certain flaws, and I think a lot of us have this view of like the Muslim world, which is that like it's going to be free from certain deficiencies, and then we get there and we're like, oh, they're suffering from things just like us, if not worse, in some areas. And so I think that being a minority in a certain place has a profound impact on your devotion, your motivation. It can go either way, but I think that for me, that it's been a profound impact on my devotion. So.
And I think I see that as well from a lot of the Muslims who come over here to West Lafayette, Indiana to study from all over the world. And when they get here, they love the masjid here. And they are so attached to the MSA and the activities that are going on in the masjid. And they pray in the masjid, they live in the masjid. Actually, we have tenants upstairs in the masjid. So the masjid becomes their home, and a lot of people I've talked to have this Islamic awakening when they get here, as opposed to back home. So for all of you that have questions for AbdelRahman Murphy on adjusting, moving here, please. So we are getting questions filing in slowly. The sisters have more questions than the brothers. Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand, and Maz is, all right, there you go. Great. So, tell me about, AbdelRahman, tell me about some of your current roles down in Tennessee.
So in Tennessee right now, in Knoxville, Tennessee. Have you guys ever heard of Knoxville, Tennessee before?
I think country music when I think of Knoxville.
Nashville. Nashville, Tennessee is country music.
Oh,
Knoxville, Tennessee
right.
is mountains. Volunteers are our mascot. So in Knoxville, alhamdulillah, we have a small community, kind of probably similar to West Lafayette, maybe a little bit bigger. But it's very diverse, lots of students. It's not really a college town per se, but it has a big university there, University of Tennessee. So there's a community, there's a university, and so those things sort of overlap. And I came to Knoxville 3 years ago, started working as the youth director and working primarily with young people. They don't have an imam, we still don't have an imam, and so what ended up happening was I kind of
Got pushed into it.
a little bit, yeah. I don't want to take the title just because there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, but I started performing all the nikah and doing the janazas and taking the tours around the masjid. This is and our masjid is actually one of the few that has like a baller women's area, and the men's area is like close the door. Right? It's like, and the men are actually like, when are we gonna get a renovation? And we're like, you're not. But so we take the church groups around, we show them the masjid, I host them. Things like that. So I kind of developed that role. Then what I noticed was, so when I first got there, all of my youth were a certain age. Those are the ones that I started with. Then they grew into, the college age. I started going to the university, and we realized that we needed a presence on campus, right? Because that's where they were spending their time, and they weren't able to really make time outside of their week of study, their academic week, and their sleeping week to come to programs. And so we instituted a Muslim chaplaincy at the University of Tennessee, alhamdulillah. And so that's been pretty successful. So I'm basically taking that group of kids all the way through college, basically, is what has happened. So I've met them when they were in high school, and now I'm like with them in college. So I'm growing, yeah, exactly. So I'm growing, and they're growing, and it's been really nice. And so Knoxville, surprisingly, has a lot of very nice people. Tennessee is known for like this Islamophobic, like, can't be Muslim in Tennessee.
CNN documentary on Islamophobia was shot there.
The Murfreesboro. Yeah, that's actually near Nashville.
Oh.
So Knoxville historically, East Tennessee historically, seceded from the Confederacy during the Civil War and joined the Union. So it started off as being part of the Confederacy and left. So that gives you an idea of the open-mindedness of the people there, that they realized what they were doing was wrong, or that they didn't want to be a part of that, and they left that. The rest of Tennessee stayed, right? So Nashville, Memphis, Middle and West Tennessee. So what I found is that the people there are good people. And I think that this is true of anywhere, really. Is that in Indiana here, like, you meet people who are not Muslim, etc. And it's easy to fall into the victim trap, where we start to think that everyone's out to get us. We watch CNN, Fox News, and we all of a sudden start to become insular and hide in our shells. But people are good people. We just have to engage them and interact with them on their level, whatever that is, whatever their comfort level is. And you'll see, like, really good results, inshallah.
So a lot of your work in University of Tennessee is holocaust, counseling 101,
Yeah.
holding basketball tournaments. I mean, take us through, like, as an MSA, I guess, what do you guys do on your campus that maybe we could do on our campus? What do you see that's really beneficial on your campus that we can do?
We have 2 sessions a week called Coffee Talk, where I bring a big box of coffee, like one of those jugs, and a bunch of cookies and bagels and whatever they feel like eating that week. And we sit and we sort of like share a snack / meal together. For a lot of kids, a bagel's a meal. And we talk about Quran, we have different topics that we're going through. So right now we're going through the Purification of the Heart book, which is a poem by Imam Moda, translated by Sheikh Hamza. And so we're going through that book right now, that text. And what it does is that it gives kids the opportunity to learn on campus. But we use free coffee, and insomnia cookies and peanut butter bagels. Yeah. We use those things as a sort of trap, right? So I like plant this stuff in the room. I'm like, come on in. And they all come in. And I'm like, boom, close the door. We have to learn about Allah. But they've grown to love it, actually. And, one kid said something to me. So it's been like a year now since we've been doing this. And one kid said something to me. I was trying to get pizza for yesterday's session before I came here, because it's just been a long week and everyone has midterms. And our Thursday session is at 5. So our Monday session is at noon. But our Thursday session, we have it later so that some kids can make it, commuters and stuff, can stay and make it. And I said, I want to get pizza for everybody. I wasn't able to get it. So I kind of had to go back to my typical cookies and coffee thing. And they were like, Brother Murphy, we don't care about the food. We just love the sessions. So once the kids said that, I was like, and that's where I stopped bringing food. And we just call it boring talk. No, I'm kidding. So anyways, that's what we do on campus. I generally teach about 5 calls a week. So Sunday through Thursday.
Man.
Sunday.
Is it possible? Can we work out like a live stream for that?
I actually don't like.
No?
I love you guys, but I don't like live streams.
That's okay.
Because it ruins the. I don't mean to awkwardly friend zone your.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
No, but I like teaching in person. I think there's a profound difference.
Do you think that social component, for college age, is almost as important? Like, I guess not as important as the knowledge as the end, but do you think it's a big component? Is just developing that healthy social atmosphere that the young people, in your experience as a youth chaplain, how vital is that social?
I think it's more important. I think knowledge will come. Knowledge is static. It will be there. You can seek it in doses that you're comfortable with, but finding good friends is very rare. And so what we try to do is we try to craft good suhbah. Like, we want kids to have good companionship throughout college, because that's an identity formation age. Erickson says that between the ages of 13 and 20, you're forming your identity. You're really discovering who you are, what life means to you, how you view the world, what your purpose is. And so, as such, we try to really concentrate on that age and establishing healthy circles, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that we're trying to surround people with, like, always doing things that are like, hey, let's read Sahih Bukhari, it's Friday night. Like, and that's cool if someone wants to do that. But I just want kids to know that they can be Muslim and enjoy life, right? In ways that are good for them and not harmful for them. And so the suhbah component is huge. It's huge. Unfortunately, I'm missing this, so I can be with you guys, inshallah. But tomorrow we have an annual tailgate for our football games. Is football like a big deal here?
Oh yeah, we're big. I'm big on Bruce.
Big Ten. Who's your rival? Indiana.
Oh yeah, Indiana's. Okay. Yeah. Do we have any Indiana? Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, Indiana.
Still trying to figure out a game plan.
Yeah.
IU or PU? And then I, right? That's the whole thing. IUPUI.
Oh yeah, sure. We were planning to get some IUPUI people, and IU people as well tonight, but we'll see what happens.
Sure, inshallah. But
Purdue's definitely the best university in the state. No doubt.
Is it?
And in my opinion, the world. So.
In the world, okay.
Yeah. So what do you see about, as we're gonna get going into the questions now. We got a good, healthy stream going in. So keep them coming. We're gonna get into question mode. Before we do that, what do you think is maybe the 1 or 2 major issues that you see for college age Muslim youth, and how can we go about addressing those? It's a big question.
It's a lot. I think like there's things that tie into them. I mean, identity is definitely one of them.
Identity, sure.
Social circle is one of them. I think just generally like people, do they really even like? A lot of kids are just like, do I even believe in this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have that moment where they're like, I don't even know if this is what I want. Or I've been taught this my whole life, and I'm just kind of not sure. Because it's really their first college, high school in a way is sort of like a taste, but college for a lot of young men and women is their first experience for intellectual freedom, right? Where they're able to finally break free of like being told what to believe, and they're kind of, and unfortunately what I see is that they run to like the philosophy 101 class, and they're like, man, my mind just got blown away today. I'm like, what did you guys talk about? They're like, we talked about, is a table called a table because it has 4 legs? Or because we call it a table? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, is a dog a table? It has 4 legs. And I'm like, you have way too much time.
They're one version of it.
Yeah. So I remember I took a philosophy class and we had similar discussions, and I was just like, what are you doing? I was just like, that's way too much time. So, anyways, but I think that's a huge struggle because like kids end up seeking this pseudo-intellectualism that makes them feel like they're super smart. And in reality, like what Islam teaches us is that humility is really the key to intelligence, right? Whereas the academy is trying to teach you that no, arrogance is the key to intelligence.
I know everything.
Yes.
Yeah,
I know
figure
everything.
it out.
Yeah, the academy's the answer. You know, empirical process, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas Allah is saying, humble yourself, and knowledge will come to you.
Right.
So we try to sort of battle that, and I think generally speaking, these things are products of communal issues. And college is like, the struggle with college is not necessarily one struggle or 2 struggles, but it's that all of the problems tend to start bubbling at that point, right? So they start to boil over a little bit. I mean, they're simmering the whole time. When they get to college, that freedom sort of acts as a catalyst, and then you just see it all come out, right? And so I kind of try to act as a safety net.
Do you see a lot of cases where maybe Muslim youth they kind of get to that point, and no one's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Do you ever see kids kind of lose hope in Allah's mercy for them, or they do something wrong and they know it, but they're afraid to come back to Islam because of maybe the community's not going to accept them, or they themselves you know what I'm saying? Or do you see that, or
Yeah.
what advice do you maybe Muslim youth maybe that are here today that may have that simmering that, oh, I'm never going to be good enough for this Islam thing. So what advice do you have?
I think it's they hide that with resentment at first. So like you start to talk to kids and they're like, is it okay? Like one kid was like, he asked me a question. He's like, is it okay to be angry with God? And I was like, what do you think I'm gonna say, dude? Like he was like, I have a serious question. Is it okay for me to be angry with God? Now I'm not doubting his question. I'm just saying like, why don't you just say I'm angry with God? Like why are you trying to find validation first and then? Because obviously I'm going to say no, and then you're automatically pitting that as a sort of contradictory sort of work. Now we're having an argument, as opposed to you just saying something and then I'm having a conversation with you. So he said that, and I said why, and we started talking, and we found out that it was because of the way that he was taught about Islam in Sunday school. That he was taught about this, and I told him that's not the case. Like the way it was portrayed to you was not necessarily accurate, and so the person tried their best, but they just didn't do, I guess, the best job that was needed. And so after clarifying some things, one thing that I realized about some kids in college is that they have to sort of give Islam and seeking knowledge like an honest chance. Like Islam, what I always tell my kids is Islam works if you honestly give it a shot. If you sort of like give it like a half shot, when your parents want you to do something, or you're with a group and you all want to try something and you don't want to do it, you try to like sabotage every effort. You guys ever done that before? So like I was just recently on vacation.
Some of my friends want to go to like that restaurant.
Yeah. And you're like, car's out of gas.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you just go to a gas station. They're like, no, I just don't feel comfortable with them anymore. I don't know why. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? So you always try to sabotage, like when things you don't want to happen, and that you find out more about yourself than anything. So I was recently on vacation with a group of people in Florida, and they wanted to go to like Universal Studios and Disney World, and I'm just not into theme park stuff beyond like the inevitable, basically human rights violations that those parks are probably engaging in. I just don't like princess culture, and I don't like, I'm just not a fan of it.
No.
I'm not a party pooper. I just don't like it. So they were like, all right, we're gonna wake up at 7:30, and I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, I'm not gonna wake up at 7:30. So I woke up at like 7:50, and they were like, we have to go, and I was like, just go ahead without me, it's fine. I don't want to go. And I feel like a lot of people do that with Islam. So like Islam is like, look, this is the solution to your problem, and they're like, and they act or they feign trying to give it a shot, but they don't really give it a shot. So like a person, for example, who's like, I don't know, man, I just can't lower my gaze, I can't stay away from women, I can't. I'm like, do you actually try fasting, or do you just, he's like, yeah, I've tried it. I'm like, when? Ramadan. I'm like, okay, that was 7 months ago. Like try it outside of Ramadan. Try it once a week, right? See how you feel. See if it sort of like tempers you. See if it like sort of calms you. Things like that. And I think that I tell my kids, dude, if you give it an honest shot, it'll work, right? And the ones who have, alhamdulillah, like they've come back and basically, it's not any credit to me. It's obviously that's true.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've given it a shot means a lot to me, and I think they've found it to be successful.
And when they do make a mistake or they do slip up, that knowing Allah's mercy is there for them. Is that a big thing? Do you think, or
kind of sort of? I think it's
people know that.
You have people on both sides, right?
Uh-huh.
So you have people who like think that Allah is never going to be merciful to them. You have people who think that despite whatever they do, they'll somehow find a way into Jannah, into the highest heaven. You know what I'm saying? So we try to sort of bring everybody to the middle. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful to those who seek it.
Right.
And that's what I always tell my youth, like, yes, Allah is the most merciful, but you have to seek that mercy. It's not just going to come to you after a life of negligence of Allah, of your relationship with Allah. Like when you take someone for granted in this life, if I took you for granted or you took me for granted, then when you needed me most, I may or may not be there for you. But if you were someone who was consistently there for me throughout my life, then when you needed me, I would be there for you, right? Because like you've always been there for me. And so it's the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that our relationship with Him is that if we neglect Him, then He may or may not afford us that mercy when we need it. But if we always try to make an effort to be there for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever that means, obviously He doesn't need us, but in that relationship we make an effort, then we can expect His promise to be true, which is that He will be there. Right? So
great point. With that being said, we're going to go into question mode. That's okay with you.
Okay, sure.
We're going to get a few of them in, inshallah, as much as we can. And between all of us here, each question is going to get its right and respect. Feel free to talk about as long as you think necessary on each question. We got a healthy. Oh, there's some fun questions here too. We got a healthy 20 questions on each side.
What are we going to pray?
We're going to pray in about 10 minutes or so. We're going to answer a couple and then take a break. For prayer, we are going to have the sisters pray in a room right there. There's Stewart 213. It's right across the hall. There are restrooms right here for wudu, for men and women. Just because of the space issue in this room, we're going to have, in order to fit everyone, we're going to put the women over there. It's reserved for us, the Muslim Student Association. It's empty. It's a nice room right across the hall, and the brothers are going to pray in the back in about 10 minutes, inshallah. So, all right, we're going to start with the sisters. All right, question number 1. How to have patience with a Muslim spouse who is not practicing much and is not willing to hear about Islam. I know I need to be patient and practice it myself, but I get impatient and very upset at times.
So this question comes back to like the general idea that any relationship, any marriage, a business relationship, a friendship, is nothing more than a communication of expectations and a fulfillment of those expectations. So my relationship with my brother is that he is my older brother, I'm his younger brother. We have certain spoken and unspoken expectations of what that means to us. So for example, if we're both in the room and my mom calls for one of us to come and like grab something from her because my mom is Egyptian, so she's 5'2", and like we're all like 6 foot something. So if my mom calls for us, then the general expectation might be like, okay, if he's busy because he's older, he's in professional grad school, etc., then and the younger brother goes and gets something, right? And that's not universal, but it's just an expectation. So those things are fulfilled. So any relationship you have, think of any relationship, you can apply that value to it, that rule to it, that you have expectations of that relationship, and you hope to be those things to be fulfilled. Marriage is a little bit different because, well, not different, but it's a little bit challenging because you meet somebody and you haven't really given them like a lifetime of what your expectations are. You haven't talked to them. When you have family members, it's a lot easier because you sort of grow together. But with somebody that you're meeting and that you're getting to know for a few months, if not a couple of years, you have to really communicate those expectations very clearly. And sometimes change happens in a marriage, right? Sometimes people change after they've gotten married or through a marriage. I think it's important for expectations to be communicated.
And maybe renewed over time.
Renewed over time, reevaluation, I would say. I'm not trying to make this too scientific, but I think it's at times we have to provide systems for our relationships in order for them not to fail. We tend to think that we can just sort of, do things like wing it, right? Like, oh, it's a marriage, right? You're just supposed to love each other. But lots of marriages where two people love each other fail, right? Because they just don't communicate and set up systems for success. And so I think that one good way to do this, number one, is that ask yourself, is this the only conflict in your marriage? Or are there other conflicts that are also symptomatic of the same thing, right? So for example, like if your husband or wife is not living up to the certain religious expectations that you have, ask yourself, do they fail in other regards as well? And if that's the case, ask yourself, am I being clear about what I'm expecting from them? Because is it right for me to judge their effort and say they failed when I haven't actually even given them a solid rubric, right? Would a professor ever fail you without telling you what he wanted? Yes, he would, right? The answer is professors are terrible people. But, no, I'm just kidding. For all the professors in this room, sorry.
We have a few.
Yeah, I don't mean that. But the general idea is that in order to maintain fairness, they would be like, I'm looking for this, right? The professor's like 10 points this, 50 points this, 30 points this, etc. It's the same with a relationship. So talk to your spouse. Go out, right? Have a heart-to-heart. Be able to really think about what you want from this relationship and ask them what they want from this relationship and see if those things are compatible, right? And try to work and make those things compatible. If you value something, like, for example, your faith and your relationship with Allah, and that person doesn't yet value that, then ask them, like, what do you think you will value, or when might you value that, or will you ever value that? And if that's the case, I'm not suggesting divorce, I'm just saying that you have to really talk about these things, because if you don't, and you go like 5-10 years down the line, they don't solve themselves, like a knot. You don't leave a knot on a rope, and after 3 years you're like, maybe it'll untie itself. You just come back every day, you're like, nope, not there, it's still there, right? You have to really apply some sort of system to solve that. And I think counseling is a really great option. As a counselor, I get hurt by the Muslim community, because whenever I suggest counseling, the first response is, I'm not crazy. And I'm like, I know you're not crazy. Like, I didn't call you that, right? And first of all, like, what does crazy even mean? Like, I've got lots of clients that from the Muslim community who are bipolar. I don't think they would appreciate being called crazy. I mean, they're wonderful people, and they have, certain struggles in their life. And yes, being bipolar is one of them, but at the same time, they're not crazy by the stereotyped kind of expression or manifestation of that phrase. And so whenever someone says, like, seek out counseling, don't let your inside say, oh, that's for everybody else but me, I don't need counseling, right? I get counseled. I get counseling whenever I'm having struggles or having issues. I go to my therapist. He's also my mentor in my degree, but I sit down with him and I'm like, I need an hour of your time. And he sits me down and we talk things out, and it really helps. Think about it. The Prophet Muhammad what was he other than a counselor for people? And for the Sahaba who came to him. And Angel Jibreel ﷺ served as a counselor for, obviously through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, served as a counselor to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And sometimes Allah directly served as a counselor to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? So
Yusuf as a counsel for his hard times. And
yeah. Exactly.
Adina Nasiha, the religion is advice.
Exactly. So what I would say to answer this question as a recap, number one is you need to really do a self-evaluation of what your expectations are in a relationship, what your values are, what you want from this whole experience. And then I think you need to ask ask them to do the same, and then compare answers, and then also come to a point of communicating those expectations together. And inshallah, you'll see that since things are kind of like laid out in the open, you'll see some growth in that direction, inshallah.
You think that's also true for those who are looking to get married to channel those conversations on expectations?
I don't perform any marriages anymore unless they sit with me for 3 hours of premarital counseling. Yeah. So there's always those people that come to the message and they're like, I found her. I'm like, great, let's do counseling. They're like, no, we have to get married today. And I'm like, not by me, right? Go find someone else, homie. Like, I feel bad saying that, but I can't. The reason why is because I had my first marriage recently divorced, and it killed me, right? Think about that, like it killed me. Not my marriage, yeah. The nikah that I performed, it was the first one that I've ever done. I've done probably like 30 or 40 now. It's the first one that I've ever done that ended up going through a divorce, and it killed me. And I asked myself, what could I have done? Not maybe to prevent the divorce, but perhaps to get them to sort of even, I'm not saying prevent the marriage, but what could I have gotten them to sort of approach it with a proper mindset that could have maybe led to a different result, etc. And I realized that I performed a marriage without asking very many questions. I just did the basics, right? The whole imam thing. I was running after Friday Jummah. Want to get married? Okay, let's go ahead and sit down. Let's talk to you for 10 minutes. Let's do this. And
it happens in this question too.
Yeah, so I made a promise to myself. That I'm not going to do that anymore. So 3 sessions, 3 hours with me.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, we are in Maghrib time right now, so we are going to go ahead and take a 10 to 15 minute break. Again, the restrooms are right out here. In order to facilitate room for everyone, we're going to have the sisters pray in the room, Stewart 213, right across the hall. And the brothers, we are going to get together and move some tables in the back a little bit and conflate them and pray in the back of the room. Jazakallah khair. See everyone in 10-15 minutes. We're going to try to make this break quick. Thank you. Alright, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. And I ask everyone to take a seat and slowly get settled down. Alhamdulillah, we have a good amount of questions. Please keep them coming in. We're going to go more quicker through questions, I guess. I'm going to let you do most of the talking as we get going. Before we get into the other serious ones, this is the brother's question. I thought this was a sister's question. It was pretty interesting. Pacers or Bulls? It's the brother's question. This season, how about this season? Not in your allegiance, but...
I don't even know if the Pacers should play this season. It's sad. We'll see. I think the Pacers are going to surprise a lot of people. I mean, it's the East, so they'll definitely make it, but... Right. Well, I don't know.
Bulls are looking good this year.
Bulls, yeah.
Is there a concerted effort amongst Muslims? Ali Fiaz,
Yeah.
Is he trying to make Derrick Rose Muslim?
I actually already asked Derrick Rose to be Muslim.
No way.
Yeah, before when he was in high school or when he was in college.
Wow. What did he say?
He said no thanks, but.
Mashallah.
Awkward. Oh my gosh. No, I kind of was like engaging on that conversation with him before he was like famous. And he was just like, but his brothers and Jesse Jackson are like really protective over him. So they don't let, yeah. So they don't let anyone talk to him basically. So.
Yeah, no one got it. All right, back to the questions. Here we go. All right, I'm gonna group a couple of these together because they are similar. In the news, a lot of times nowadays is ISIS, and I know your khutbah talked about this a little bit, but if you could just briefly mention, with so many extremists hijacking the religion of Islam, how can we do to portray that? What can we do as Muslims to portray that message of Islam? I know you talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, essentially today's khutbah was focused around how can we respond to allegations or confusion, and I think the key is to have good character and good manners and really live the example of the Prophet Muhammad in every way possible. Down to the nitty-gritty, this means holding doors open for people. This means tipping waiters and waitresses. I once had a brother, when I was in Dallas, he asked me to give a khutbah on tipping. And I said, like, why? And he's like, I work at Olive Garden, and whenever anyone comes into the restaurant and they're, like, noticeably Muslim, he said, all the waiters and waitresses run to the bathroom. Because the next waiter and waitress has to pick the next guest, right? Or it's like a random selection process. And so he's like, they all run because they don't want to get tip like 3% of their bill. And so the idea is that we have to really like, if that means that Muslims have to start tipping 20% instead of 15 or 25 instead of 20, so be it, dude. Consider it sadaqah. Consider it charity. Like, there's no sort of intention that goes wasted. And so really just step up your game, step up my game, inshallah, in terms of how we treat people.
Smiling in the face of your brother.
I was just about to say that, actually, like smiling, because I was wearing this, right, this thobe, and I'm always very conscious when I wear a thobe, because I'm like, I don't want to walk down the hallways like, and everyone's like, oh my God, ISIS is here, so I'm like, I'm very conscious to like smile and stuff. And actually, I saw this elderly lady, and she was in the hotel, and I saw her. She gave me like this, like kind of like, what is he wearing? Why is he wearing a dress? And I gave a smile, and I was just like, go Boilermakers, and she was like, yeah, right. So like being able to connect with people in a way that they understand and are used to is very important. A good character is the like key to relationships. So focus on that. Then after that, you have to gain knowledge about your religion. If you don't know enough about your religion to explain why people are wrong when they kill people in the name of your religion, you don't know enough about your religion, right? And Google is not going to help. You're not always going to have Sheikh so and so or Imam so and so or Google to search. Like sometimes you just have to study it yourself. Sometimes you have to set aside a couple days and do some research on a topic. Listen to some lectures, read some books, right? Read some articles, like finish. Don't just read the title of the article. Finish the entire article, right? I had a friend once that told me that he read an article, or he saw an article that said that we're in such an information age that people don't even read articles anymore. They just read the headlines. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, what did the rest of the article say? He said, I don't know. I just read the headline. And he was being completely serious, and he didn't realize the irony until he just said that. He was like, oh my gosh, right? So read the article, read the whole thing, study it, look up the references. I need you guys to know this stuff as well as our scholars do, right? You may not know the fiqh of inheritance, you may not know the fiqh of this or fiqh of that, but if you can understand how to succinctly and articulate, well, an idea about your religion to people who are confused, that's important. That's very important. And then the last step is to really just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely, and He will really take care of everything, inshallah. So.
Another follow-up question to that fits well is, what are some realistic, practical ways for young Muslims on campus to increase their Islamic knowledge? They're busy with classes and other stuff. I know in your khutbah you mentioned podcasts.
Yeah, we live in a day and age now where like information is not the problem, right? The problem is us prioritizing that information. So I would say the keys for college students to gain more knowledge or just do better in school in general. Number one, don't go to bed late. Okay, there's no barakah in sleeping late. It's not part of the practice of the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet ﷺ would actually pray Aisha. He would pray it a little bit later, but he would pray it and then he would go to sleep right after he prayed it. And then he would wake up early or in the middle of the night, and then he would wake up early, and actually it was his practice to stay up after Fajr. And then there would obviously be like a midday nap, Qaylula. But if you can't do that, it's fine. Just don't go to bed at 2, 3 in the morning thinking that you're going to have a productive day the next day. It's not possible. And there's no quality of sleep that's like night sleep. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ ma'asha. He made the day for work, living, and the night as a cloth or a covering. All right, and this we learned from like the Arabic poetry that libas can mean protection, it can mean comfort, right? And so you're only going to get that comfort in the night sleep. You're not going to get it during the day sleep, right? So sleep on time. Number 2, when you sleep on time, you'll be able to wake up early. Don't sleep after Fajr, right? Make that time a time for you to study. It's actually better to study after Fajr than it is to study all night, sleep, miss Fajr, and then go take your exam, right? Go to bed early, wake up early, study, and then go walk into your exam confident after an hour or 2 of studying, right? Hour or 2 of reviewing. Instead of doing that, review the night before. So stay up after Fajr. Add that time. And the other thing I would say is like use your transit time very wisely. So like walking and stuff, walking, driving, sitting, waiting for class, in between classes. Use your transit time very wisely. And you can do that by listening to a lecture, by watching YouTube clips, by reading a book, right? Buy an Islamic book that you're interested in. I would suggest Sirah. Sirah is a very good topic. It's very easy. It has a narrative thread that you can follow. When you pause, it's not like you have to restart your whole hypothetical process. It's a story. And so if you get the Tariq Ramadan Sirah book, it's really good. It's called In the Footsteps of the Prophet. Just pick up that book and just carry it around with you, and I guarantee you'll finish it in like less than a month if you read it sparingly. You can finish it in a couple of days if you really tried, right? So those are the 3 steps I would say. Go to sleep early, wake up early, stay up, and also add a regiment of study to your life. Okay, add a regiment of study. I would say for college students, between 15 minutes to an hour a day is good of seeking knowledge. Right, 15 minutes is very doable.
Do you think a halakha, even if it's just a small one question from the sisters is, how can we keep a halakha going?
Keep it short.
Keep it short.
Our coffee talks are 30 minutes, yeah. Coffee talks I didn't mention that, they're 30 minutes long. I purposely did that because the minute you make it an hour, people feel like it's a huge commitment and they can't commit to it. But if you say it's 30 minutes, people literally are like, oh, I'm just coming in and get some coffee. Like wait in line at Starbucks for how long? 12 minutes, right? Get your drink wrong, your name spelled weird, right, on the cup. This guy, he placed an order for Mark he said my name is Mark with a C. So the guy wrote Kark. Did you see that? Instead of writing Mark with a letter. Okay, so anyways, sorry. Thanks, Internet. Way to ruin my reality. So the point is, make it short. If you have a halakha on campus, 30 minutes, inshallah, and you will be able to keep people committed to that, and yes, food.
Okay, from the brothers, from the parents, how to increase our children's interest in Islam. Our teenage children find it more enjoyable to play video games or go out with friends than to go to Islamic events, even prayers.
This is how it is. I mean, one time there was the Prophet Muhammad, he gave a request to his house servant Anas to go get some things, and he gave him some money. He said, "Go get some things." And Anas said that he was walking on the way to the place, and he saw his friends playing a game in the street. So he said, and he's narrating the story about himself. He said, "I saw my friends, and I started to play with them." And he said, and a long time had passed, and all of a sudden I felt a hand on my shoulder, right? And he looked back and he saw the Prophet Muhammad smiling at him. The Prophet was smiling at him, and he said, "Did I ask you to do something or no?" Right? And so, and I said yes. And so the Prophet said, "Go ahead and do it." Right? So you find here that it's not like a American, quote unquote, American problem. Like my kids, they just want to play video games and hang out. Anas got a direct order from the Prophet Muhammad, okay, after seeing the moon split, after seeing all these miracles, after seeing wahi being delivered to the Prophet, and even that order was distracted, right? So now you're telling a kid who has never seen the Prophet, right, in person, in life, so to speak, he has probably been taught that this is the way, but never actually had that self-discovery. And you're telling him to give up socializing for a lecture or things like that. It's tough. It's tough. On the side of the child, it's tough. So what do you do whenever you want someone to do something that's tough for them? Is you make incentives for that thing, right? And that's not ruining their sincerity, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive everyone who attends a halaqah of knowledge, of remembrance, even the one who didn't want to be there. The one who his friend brought him and said, "Just sit here," the one who was sitting in the back, the angels, they say to Allah, "Forgive him too," Allah says, "Forgive him too," right? Just because that person was there. So if we give incentives to people to come to events, my mom, for example, used to say 1 hour of Quran memorization equals 1 hour of PlayStation. I finished memorizing Surah Baqarah like that. I'm serious. I did. I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Boom." And she splashed through it. And that's some of the strongest Quran that I remember, right?
So be realistic, be practical.
Be realistic, be practical, and also ask yourself seriously. There was this one dad, he told me, he said, "My son is a hypocrite." And I was like, instantly all the Quran, ayat, and hadith about the punishment of the hypocrites went flying through my mind. I was like, "Oh my God." So I said, "That's a terrible thing to say. Why would you say that?" And he said, the Prophet ﷺ said that a person who ignores or finds it difficult to go to Fajr in Jama'ah, or Isha and Fajr in Jama'ah, that person's a hypocrite, right? That's the hardest prayers for the hypocrite to perform. And I said, "Okay." He goes, "My son does not go to Fajr." I said, "How old's your son?" He said, 16. I said, "Okay." I said, "Uncle, when did you start going to Fajr?" And he was like, I don't know, maybe when I was like 35. I was like, your son has 19 years left before you can call him a hypocrite. You know? And it's ironic, it's funny because Sheikh Abdel Nasser, my teacher, he actually has a very similar story about his dad. Because his dad became practicing, his family wasn't all that practicing, and his dad went to, you know, a sheikh and said, I want my family to start taking deen seriously, and he said to them, give them time. Like, you just caught this now in the middle of your life, and you want your kids who are still in their teen years to take it as seriously as you? Like, do you not realize how ridiculous that sounds? Right? It's like asking a 14-year-old to already have a college degree. It's just like, give them time to get there. So number one, I would say is add incentives to the deal. Okay, if you come to tonight's lecture, inshallah, then tomorrow night you can have your friends over and y'all can just kick it and play video games. Okay. The second thing is you want to make sure that you give them time, and the third is that when you ask them to do something, ask yourself, like, is this method of education palatable for a young person? You know, like, is it like a talk show is much more palatable than an hour-and-a-half lecture on the fiqh of wudu? Like, it's just not going to be. It's not going to be what they want to learn. Like, ask them what they want to learn about their religion, and let them seek out that resource. Right? There's tons of resources online, in person, inshallah. The MSA can be of benefit to where you can come to a deal with them. Say, okay, you know, I don't want you to have to learn fiqh of inheritance, but what subject do you want to learn about? They're like, angels. Okay, there's lectures on the afterlife. They can learn all about the angels and the unseen, right? And then as they get older, I want to learn about the Day of Judgment. What's going to happen on that day? Boom, you have a whole lecture series on that. So just kind of like interact with them, ask them. You know, when Prophet Ibrahim a.s., when he was given the command to slaughter his son, Ismail, what did he say to him? He said, I've been commanded to slaughter you, and he said, Fandur madha tara. Tell me what you think. And we know that commands of the prophets are non-negotiable. When God gives the prophet a command, it's not like, okay, well, let's take an offer back to him, a counteroffer, right? God is not a car salesman. Like, you don't go back and forth. He gives the prophets a command, it's there. Why did he ask his son, what do you think then? Why? Why did he say, what do you think? It actually, technically, to be very blunt, it doesn't matter what, in that scenario, the person thinks. Because that engagement is important for that relationship. For Ibrahim a.s. to say, what is your opinion on the matter? Right? So as parents, we need to really seek out and value the opinions of our young people in things that we want them to do, as well as things that they want to do. We need to understand those things and increase that.
That's a great answer. From the sister side, did you ever have any doubts about Islam? If so, how did you come back? What can help battle these doubts for young Muslims?
Yeah, I think everybody does to some degree. Like, if not like doubts about belief, maybe doubts about certain things, or just laziness in general can lead to doubt. But I think that doubt, you know, shak, is a disease of the heart. You know, it's one of those things that comes about. And I think a couple things can help you. Number one is good company. Number two is surrounding yourself with good information. I think a lot of people get involved online with Reddit and different, you know, there's like this whole ex-Muslim subreddit where a bunch of ex-Muslims who all tell their stories about why they're ex-Muslims. No offense if anyone's an ex-Muslim here, but they're all like, oh, like Islam is this because of this, this, this. And usually it has nothing to do with textual sources. And then when they do cite textual sources, it's like a third grade argument, right? It's like, oh, why did the Prophet do this? It's like, dude, I mean, come on. Not even the Prophet's worst enemies, not even his worst enemies accused him of having a problem with that. You know what I'm saying? So like, why are you now, 1,400 years later, bringing that up? So I think that most people, when they go through those doubts, they have to really seek the right knowledge and not engage in debate and discourse online. Right? YouTube comments are the black hole of stupidity. Like, just don't get involved. You know, honestly, just don't. It's like, oh, if I write the perfect comment, he's going to convert. No, okay? It's not going to happen. Just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Internet, what do they say? Internet, I forgot what they said. They said like something like internet debating is like this. It's like no matter who wins, you're still a loser. So it's just don't worry about that stuff. Just seek knowledge, surround yourself with good people, and whenever you have doubts, don't be afraid to talk about those doubts, right? Because a lot of other people probably have similar questions and similar doubts, and if all of you can come together and seek the answer together from a qualified person, then inshallah it'll strengthen your relationship with Allah together and with each other. And I think that there's a concept in counseling known as universality, which is basically that when a person thinks that they are unique in their struggle, that struggle becomes exponentially more difficult. But the minute a person realizes that everyone is struggling similarly, then that struggle becomes easier to handle. And so I think that if a person, for example, has doubts or questions, not to go like broadcast it, but to like maybe if they hear that someone else has questions, or if there's a forum like this where you can ask questions, to bring it up. And you know, has anyone here ever had questions about Islam that they didn't understand? Like they read something like, I don't get it. Anyone? Raise your hand. Yeah, I think we all have. Like I definitely have, right? And those can lead to doubts. So looking around the room now, you can see that other people have had those things, and it doesn't feel as bad, right? Shaitan's going to try to separate you like the lone sheep, right? So.
Let's see. Next one from the brothers. How do you deal with depression as a young Muslim? Depression. Counseling, therapy.
I generally, personally, have the opinion that I don't like to medicate right away. I think medication should be a last resort when it comes to mental health. I think that a lot of anxiety, I think anxiety is the core source of all mental health issues, and I think it manifests itself in different ways. I think people feel, and this is a psychodynamic theory, right? This is like Freud's theory. Freud was an interesting guy, but he had some very solid points. But I think that people need to seek counseling. They need to seek therapy if they feel depressed. Don't try to self-medicate, right? Don't try to be like, oh, I know how to fix it, because oftentimes like it's not that easy. I do think that there are certain scenarios you can place yourself in to help your mood. You know, there's studies that show that exercise, for example, helps a lot. That sleep helps a lot during the right times. That eating different things helps a lot. So eating properly. There are studies that actually have linked. I know you're the food guy. I shouldn't be talking in front of you.
Okay.
Now you have to Maddox from Medina, right? Like I can't give fatwa Imam Maddox from Medina. But it's okay. Anyways, no one got that. Anyway, okay. So the point is that they've linked certain chemicals in foods to depression, right? They've linked like certain processed chemicals, certain like junk foods, fast foods, to mood changing. And so watch what you eat, watch who you're around, watch what you're listening to. You know, music has a profound impact on your mood, right? If you had a crush on somebody and they didn't reciprocate, right? If they friend zoned you and then all of a sudden you're listening to like all this sad music, like Taylor Swift's on repeat, then like things are just not going to go well for you that night, right? So don't you know? I think that to some degree your mood has a profound impact on you, but don't ever trick yourself into believing that you cannot have an impact on your mood, right? Because that's just not the case. Right?
To build on that,
and then at the end of all of that, seek help. You know, Purdue definitely has resources for you guys. Yeah, they definitely have resources for you guys to go, and it's all confidential. A lot of it's covered by your tuition. If not, then it's going to be a nominal charge, and it's definitely worth it. I mean, talking to somebody who has studied the science is very important.
One thing for some people in the back that had a little trouble hearing you, so they're requesting maybe you may have to hold it every once in a while. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I was comfortable with. Kind of building on that, there is kind of a sub-related question, which was relating iman and depression. A lot of times, some people equate, I'm sad and therefore I'm just a bad person, or a crisis of faith, or how do you deal with depression in Islam and that kind of relationship? I know there's that stigma in the Muslim community. Oh, you're not depressed. You just need to read Quran, or you know.
Yeah.
Which is a good part of the solution, but
yeah. How
could you elaborate?
So the 10-step process, or the 10-step program, right? Or the 12-step program as well. There's two of them, but the idea is that they always incorporate some sort of like higher being. And studies show that generally speaking, people who are engaged in faith have a much higher quality of mental health than those who do not. And this isn't to say that like someone who doesn't cannot, but there's definitely credence to the idea that your relationship with Allah can help you in your quality of life, right? I think that generally speaking, one thing that we need to do in order to sort of see, depression is a word that we use very, very easily. Right? Are you sad? Are you upset? Or are you clinically depressed? Like those are three different things. You know, you could be upset about a certain moment. You could be sad about a trend in your life. But if you're clinically depressed, right? If you're actually depressed, that could be from nurture, but it also could be nature. It could be chemical. So if someone is depressed, then we cannot understate the importance of getting therapy. If someone is just upset or sad, then I think the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has numerous advices to people who are suffering from sadness or being upset. You know, one of which is to realize and count the blessings that you have in your life. One of which is to realize the struggles that other people have. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ actually gave advice to somebody who was basically feeling upset with life. He said, go hang out with the orphans, right? He said, go pet the head of the orphans, meaning like go and spend time with them. Like imagine going on a Saturday and feeding people who are homeless or hungry, and that might be their only meal, and then ask yourself, like, do I really am I in the right place to be upset with my condition in life, right? Now, I'm not saying this people who are actually clinically depressed, like that needs to be sought out, but if someone is just upset with certain things, like, oh my God, I got a B-, oh my God, my life's over, I'm not going to med school, blah, like, that's, you can get over that, inshallah, you can move past that, inshallah, and one way to do that is by examining your blessings more than you examine your trials, right? By emphasizing your blessings more than your trials. And the Quran is loaded with ayat that ask us to refer back to our blessings, right? وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says if you try to count one blessing of Allah, you wouldn't be able to do it. What about multiple blessings? Of course not. So.
Going back to the sister side, as a young Muslim, how do I overcome the strong pressure from my non-Muslim friends to do forbidden things in Islam?
This is a tough question. Particularly because like sisters definitely have it way tougher than brothers do, like in a lot of aspects of life. So
that's another question as well. Could you speak to those challenges that sisters face in the US? They're kind of both.
I cannot actually. Believe it or not, I'm not a sister. So don't let the beard fool you. Right? I'm not a sister. So
go back to that.
Actually, the beard should have fooled all of you. Now that I say that. But the point is that like I hate speaking on behalf of sisters because it's not often that they even get a chance to voice themselves, which is incorrect, period. But I would say that in general, let's answer this question generally, universally. What are some ways that a brother and a sister can help themselves dealing with pressure from non-Muslim or even Muslim friends? Let's be honest. Like, non-Muslim and Muslim does not delineate whether the person's a good friend or not. I have a lot of good non-Muslim friends, and I have a lot of not so good Muslim friends, right? So I think that one thing is that you need to be able to have people respect your values. If you can be friends with people who respect your values, then you're never going to have to sacrifice those values for people. If they respect the fact that you don't drink, that you don't date, that you pray on time. I mean, I've even heard stories of non-Muslim roommates reminding their Muslim people to pray, like waking them up for Fajr, right? Because like they are aware of the values of that Muslim, and they're like, I'm going to help you out because I know that this is what you want to do. In the same way that if you have a roommate who wants to exercise more, you'll motivate them to do that, right? They pick up the bag of Cheetos, you're like, put that down, man, go to the gym, right? Because you know that that's what their goal is. So if you communicate what your goals are, like I said, people are good. They will help you out. But I do think that there is a reality behind the phenomenon of outgrowing your friends. I think that is sometimes in life, and I'm not saying like condescendingly like, oh, you peasants, get away. Like it's not like that. What I am saying is like, when you realize that you're coming to a fork in the road in values, right, in faith, in worldview, like how you see the world, what's important, what's your purpose. That doesn't mean that you push them away and you're like, this is the end of the road, my friend. But you're more like, look, I think I realized that you and I are just kind of different, and maybe we're not as close as we once were. We can still hang out every now and then, we can get food every now and then, but I don't think you and I are at that point where we're like going to hang out every weekend, right? Because you have these goals, I have these goals, and it was good while it lasted, So don't think that outgrowing relationships is a bad thing. It's not. The way you execute that moving on is also touchy, but don't ever think like, oh, I have to remain friends with these people for the rest of my life. It's not true. It's not the case.
All right. Question from the brothers. How do you deal with different cultures and political views in your masjid?
I don't. Next question. No, I think generally speaking, like, different cultures is one thing. Different political views is a whole different discussion. I avoid politics at all costs. Unless it's American politics, then I'm like, come, let's talk, right? But if it's like, which obviously has a lot to do with international politics, of course, but I don't get in this whole mess of like, on a formal level, on an informal level of like, if I'm at home with some friends and we're talking, right, then, shut up your mouth, Obama, right? Like that's, we'll talk. That's when we start having a serious conversation. But I don't ever, like, on the minbar, never, in the masjid, never, at Islamic events, never, never, never. Culture, on the other hand, is something that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that he created us all from different tribes and different nations, so that you can get to know one another. And so I think one way to conquer culture in the masjid is to take that first step and introduce yourself to that person, get to know each other, invite them over, right? One of the biggest tragedies that you see in big communities, and I see it now happening in smaller communities, is the cultural cliques, right? The Bengalis hang out with the Bengalis, the Malaysians hang out with the Malaysians, the Arabs hang out with the Arabs. Even the Arabs, the Syrians hang out with the Palestinians. The Muslims are on their own, right? Ahsan an-nas hum ad-dunya, like, and then you have like, you know, the other North Africans all hang out together. The Moroccans and Algerians are convinced that each of them, the other person is like so different, even though like Winston Churchill just made them different, right? So, and Pakistanis and Indians like will not look at each other in the eye when they talk to each other. This is a big community thing, and now I'm seeing it happen in small communities, which scares me because now your parties went from like 15 people to 2 people. And you're like, we're the only 2 Bengalis in this community. We must stick it out. Like, that's not the culture of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. By the way, the story of Salman al-Farisi, right? You guys know where he was from. Faris, you guys know what that is? Where is that? Persia. Okay, modern day Iran, you could say, but like Persia, right? How was the relationship of the Arabs with the Persians at that time? Not so good. Yeah, just not so good, right? You know, no big deal. Rough patch, okay? When Salman al-Farisi came to Medina, and they were about to begin building the masjid, right, the main masjid, what was his experience with these Arab men from Mecca and Medina? Did they hold his Persianness against him? No, in fact, they were arguing. You guys ever been like on a sports, at a game or something where you're picking sides, or you're playing taboo or something and you're picking teams? And how does that last person feel? Last person get picked?
Pick up basketball inside.
Yeah, exactly, right? Right, they feel terrible. Wasn't Tom Brady like one of them or something? Wasn't he like the 6th round pick or something?
Yeah, something
like that, 7th round pick. So the last person to get picked in teams feels kind of bad, right? Because that's a sign that nobody wanted them. So Salman al-Farisi was actually the last person, but they were both fighting over who gets him. They weren't saying, no, you take him, we don't want him. They were saying, how dare you try to take Salman? He's ours, right? Why was that significant? Because these are Arabs who hate Persians, or traditionally, and this is a Persian man who was sold into slavery. So even in like the social system, he's not viewed like up here, right? With no family as far as like being near him, no lineage, which is like your source of honor. And what does the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say? So the Ansar and Muhajirin are fighting over him. The Prophet said, la, Salman is from my house. Salman stays with me, right? So the idea is that you make people feel comfortable regardless your ethnic lines or divides, right? And you invite them over and you make people feel like you really conquer your nafs when it comes to this. One problem I see that's huge in this regard is stop speaking a language that you know a person does not understand. I've had whole conversations, literally 3 people. I speak Arabic, he speaks Urdu and English. We all speak English, but Arabic, Urdu. He keeps talking to me in Arabic, I keep responding in English to try to give him a hint, like stop speaking in Arabic, we have a third person here. There's actually a hadith the Prophet ﷺ said, when 2 of you are talking, do not speak and leave the third out, right? And the scholars have done qiyas and said that this also applies to language, that you can leave people out based on language, right? So we need to really be cognizant of how we treat people, especially converts. We can't be like throwing around like a bunch of language and a convert dude's like, is that the special for dinner? Like, I love taqwa, it's so delicious. Like, you know, and yes, there are certain words that we expect every Muslim to know, like assalamu alaikum, right? Like, you know, Allah, you know, things like that. These are words that every person, whether you're a convert, born Muslim, etc. Yeah, there's certain syntax that you should get hold of. That's not like shlonek, right? Makluba, like that's not like, they don't need to know these things, right? So we need to really make sure that as far as the community is concerned, when it comes to cultural lines, we just break them down. One brother, we were talking today about how to do that. I said food. My answer to everything is food, I think. But he said, how do we do that? I said food. Invite people over for food. People love trying different cuisines. People love trying different cuisines. When we were studying in Mecca, there was 1 or 2 brothers who actually were from England, but they were from Senegal. And there was a Senegalese restaurant in Mecca. So one night, and we didn't really like, you know, we all knew each other. We lived with each other for like 4 months, but it wasn't like we weren't like homies. Like the Americans were kicking it with the Americans, the Brits with the Brits, and even within America, like the Midwesterners were hanging out, the West Coast people were hanging out. So it was kind of like there were cliques and stuff. The Senegalese guys didn't like this. So what they did was one night they called the sheikh and they said, "Sheikh, can we take all the money that's allotted for dinner tonight and can we go get it?" And Sheikh Khalid said, "Sure." So he gave them the money. They went and they got us all like some of their home style cuisine. So it wasn't like the typical meals. We were like, "Wow, what's this?" And they explained all the dishes to us, and they explained like what's in each dish. And that moment, like we became so close with them. Like I felt like I was like part of Senegalese culture then because I understood now like how amazing chicken dibi is. Like it's delicious, right? And I know now what goes in it, things like that. So point is that food is a great barrier breaker, right? Great barrier breaker.
Something we should do with this motion.
Don't speak different language. Good.
This is a kind of interesting question. This is related question. Answer this question. Related question. Okay, this is kind of a hot topic. Brother's question. Struggle of lowering the gaze, handling porn websites on the internet in this society and age. Advice for brothers.
And sisters. I mean, well, everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I love how, like, brothers are oftentimes demonized for this, and then, like, a sister puts up a picture of Ryan Gosling and writes yum. And all of a sudden, we're all supposed to be like, yeah, that's totally halal. Right? Freaking cannibals. Anyways, so, I think both sides, like, both genders, like, the struggle of modesty, right? So let's go ahead and, like, give an overarching hayat, okay? We need to make sure that we all have modesty. And part of modesty is to be very cognizant of what we look at. See, some of the scholars of ihsan, of the heart, they talked about how the eyes and the ears are direct pathways to the heart. And the heart is sort of like the center of the being, of our body. And so if whatever is in the heart is going to be manifested in our actions, and the eyes are like a direct pathway to that, whatever we look at is going to go directly in there and it's going to manifest our actions, right? And so scholars, they emphasize being very careful, particularly with what you look at and what you listen to. And so this manifests itself today on college campuses. Luckily, in Indiana, it gets cold, so people have to start covering up. But all of a sudden, I don't know when leggings became pants, but now they're pants, right? And so people are struggling. Like, everyone's like, wow, I don't know where to look, basically. Like, I'm just going to look up at the sky and walk, right, and get hit by a car. And so I do think that, generally speaking, it's important to actually physically look away, right? It's important to actually physically look away. And I would say this, don't put yourself in a scenario where you're going to have to force yourself to look away a lot. Like, if you're going to go to the gym and work out, like, don't go to the yoga studio and, like, work out in the back. I'm just going to do sit-ups back here, don't mind me, creepy guy. Like, come on, right? Get out of there. Or, this is especially important in, like, movies. When you know the movie is going to have haram scenes, it might be best not to watch it, or at least not to watch it in the theater. Watch it at a place where you have a remote control and you can fast forward that joint, right? Because it's totally different when it's like, cover your eyes. Like, you can still hear everything, and like everyone's laughing in the theater. And like as a youth director, I have to look over all my kids and make sure I'm like a mom in a car. I'm like, and then I have nothing to cover my eyes, so I'm like, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to put yourself in a situation for failure. Like, you want to put yourself in a situation to succeed. Don't put yourself in the kitchen and then start complaining about why it's hot, right? So make sure that you put yourself in places where you're not going to have to sacrifice your iman to, it's not going to boil you up. Now, once you've done that, if you've taken all these precautions and you still end up in those situations, then dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a way to really have khashya and taqwa in your heart. Just make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, send salawat on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and keep it on your tongue, right? Because whenever you have something on your tongue, it's hard to forget about it, right? So you're like, astaghfirullah. Don't say it out loud. Like, the person walks by, like, astaghfirullah. That's just like, that's embarrassing. But just like say it about yourself. Think to yourself. And then actually, I'm actually a big fan of actually just looking away. Like, just physically looking away. Don't only look with your eyes. Like, actually, like, kind of lower your face or look somewhere else or pull out your phone, right? Pull out your phone. As far as websites and stuff are concerned, now that's a little bit different because You know, that's obviously in like the privacy of a person's like space and things like that. I generally think that that's one of the biggest tests of our community. You know, pornography and such is one of the biggest tests of our community. And I just think that in reality, it takes a lot of discipline and willpower. Keep yourself busy. Don't be somebody who spends a lot of time on technology or at just doing nothing. Don't be that person, because as they say, like idle hands being the devil's workshop, right? So if someone's just not, you know, busy, then all of a sudden they have a whole opportunity of doing things that are wrong presented in front of them. And so I would keep yourself busy. Don't spend a lot of time in front of the computer. I told this one kid who had a problem, and we're just being very blunt, I'm sorry, but very open. I'm going to try to keep it as PC as possible. But we had one young man who came to me with this problem. He said, I have this issue of viewing this stuff on my computer, etc. So I told him, I said, you know, okay, why don't you just take the door off of your door hinges then? Because if like closing your door gives you this false sense of security that no one's watching you, when in fact Allah is watching you, then maybe you should remove that door. That way you don't feel as comfortable. And he was like, no, man, that's weird. Like, what am I going to say to my parents? I was like, listen, bro, how bad do you want to stop? Like, how badly do you want to kill this disease? You know what I'm saying? To get it out of you. The more you want to get it out of you, the more you're going to try to work hard to get it out of you. But if someone is just trying to like ask for help because they feel like, oh, that's some way for me to, you know, make myself feel better about it or whatever, then they're not going to take proper steps. So go ahead and set up a parental block on your computer. If it comes to that, don't use the computer in privacy. I suggest to all parents, you know, not necessarily to like monitor everything, but I think like using the computer in a public space is very healthy for families. I think like if your kids have laptops or phones or whatever, you know, using it in the living room or like wherever the family can sit, I think it's healthy. You know, because we're all susceptible. No one is, and kids, that's not your parents telling you that they think you're guilty. But that's like the story of Barsisa. Like you have this very pious person who ends up, you know, committing zina because over time temptation gets to him, right? And none of us are invulnerable. All of us have vulnerabilities and susceptibilities. So, you know, put yourself in a situation to like I have it on my laptop. Whenever kids use my laptop and like they'll type in some website that's not actually bad, but it gets blocked, like Brother Murphy, and they're like, what the, right? And they're like, that's so weird. And I was like, listen, man, I'm like, yeah, I'm your imam, but I'm human, right? I have to protect myself. So I'm not above the law. I'm not going to tell you to do something that I don't do myself, right? And so, yeah, I think just taking proper steps. It's all about putting yourself in a position to succeed and avoiding positions where you fail, right?
Question from the sisters, is hookah haram?
So I have a general principle. Like because I'm not mufti, I don't give like fatwa. But I feel very comfortable answering this question, right? So I firmly believe without a doubt that hookah is wrong, and I think that the reason why most people think that it's okay is because number one, the cultural acceptance of it, like, oh, it's cultural. The other thing is that, you know, there's not a lot of research out on it yet. And you know a lot about research and how it takes time. We were talking today about longitudinal studies. So we have a whole bunch of research on cigarettes because that's been like a really known fad for a while. Now that hookah, or they call it the water pipe, is becoming more popular, you know, you're starting to see more reports out on it now. The World Health Organization, which is basically the health extension of the UN, has, you know, said repeatedly that, you know, smoking an hour or being in the environment of hookah for an hour is worse than smoking like X amount of cigarettes. And so I believe personally that it is forbidden. Now, the comeback point that a lot of people bring up is like, well, French fries are bad for you. Bam, French fries are haram. That's a whole nother discussion that food scientists, mashallah, can have. But one thing being haram does not mean that something else is not haram. Like, when something that we want to do is forbidden, that doesn't mean that we all of a sudden like try to bring down the world with us, like shooting guns, like, you know. Yes, are French fries bad for you? They can be, right? But even in fiqh, there's a difference of opinion based on things that are necessary, i.e. food, versus things that are recreational, i.e. smoking. There's a difference of opinion on how those things are interpreted in their permissibility, right? And generally speaking, in fiqh, we know al-asl fil ashya' ibah, that the default in things is permissibility until proven impermissible. And so we definitely have a lot more data now about hookah and cigarettes that I don't feel comfortable saying that it's okay or even makruh. I think absolutely without a doubt it is linked to so many things that it is haram. I mean, cigarette smoke in general is linked to or tobacco smoke is linked to almost every kind of cancer. Like almost every kind, right? So may Allah protect us, inshallah.
Question from the brothers. I look at marriages as something I want to have as a young person and enjoy, but the American and sometimes Muslim attitude is that it is the quote-unquote end of your fun or something uncomfortable
Ball and
to
chain.
approach.
Shackles.
The conclusion of the question is how to encourage halal and healthy relationships in our modern day society.
By just doing it and being an example. Getting married for me was the best thing I ever did. My wife was my best friend. We hang out all the time. There are times where our friends invite us over and we're like, no, we'd rather stay at home and play with our kitten. We're just kind of we're very social, and I think that with each other. And I think that one of the keys is that you have to really marry somebody for the right reasons. And I think when you marry someone for the right reasons, it's a lot easier to have a healthy marriage with them. I know a lot of people who marry people for money, for status, for outward beauty alone, things like that. And those marriages tend to be struggles a lot of times. But if someone marries somebody for the sake of compatibility, attraction obviously is a big deal, but attraction is not just physical, right? Attraction is not just physical. Compatibility, attraction, values being compatible, things like that, and those marriages tend to succeed a lot more. And every marriage has rough patches, every marriage has arguments and dissent and discord, but at the same time, it's when you call upon those original core principles of why you got married to sort of solve those problems. And if you only got married for superficial principles, then you're never going to have that. And I think that this is definitely a discourse in the Muslim community that people say things like, at the wedding, I've heard people at wedding speeches be like, well, we're never going to see him again, so everyone say salam, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I'm like, okay, single guy, when you go back to your apartment and eat your dinner of hot Cheetos and Gushers, go ahead, I'm like, I don't get why people try to do that. It's such a weird, to me, it's such a weird thing to express disdain for such a healthy institution. Marriage is such a wonderful thing. The Prophet ﷺ encouraged it as early as possible if the person is responsible financially, emotionally, and in maturity. So I think why would a person feel comfortable dogging it? I don't like when people say things like that. It really bothers me. I got married when I was 20. My wife was 19, right? And I think that a lot of people they doubted us. Actually, a lot of people one auntie said to my mother-in-law, it's not easy to get divorced girls married again. When we got married. And I was like, let me at her. Right? I was and I was like, subhanAllah, what kind of person, what happened to you as a child that you're so angry? Why can't you just be okay with people and happy for people, So my advice to you is to study about the marriages of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Learn how he viewed them. He was the most loving, caring, romantic husband that you will ever. I mean, he had a nickname for his wife. Aisha was called Aish. That's a cute nickname. You know what I'm saying? It's a very cute nickname. It's a cute nickname. You like it, right? I think it's adorable. I think it's adorable how the Prophet called his wife Aish. I think it's adorable how they would play pranks on each other and jokes on one another. That's very healthy. And I think that a lot of Muslims read those stories and get uncomfortable because they don't know if that's religion or they don't know. But the reality is that the religion wants us to have good relationships with everybody, with our friends, with our parents, with our spouses. And so my recommendation is study on it, read on the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad, and then view marriage positively. Even before you get married, view it as a positive thing. Don't view it as ball and chain. Don't view it as the end of your life. Yes, it's the end of a part of your life. But just like a chapter in a book finishes, right? And you may have really enjoyed that chapter, but the reality is the next chapter is going to be different and could be better in different ways, right? You can't finish a story if you just live one chapter. You have to do multiple chapters. It's the same when you get married and you want to have kids. Yes, being married and not having kids, there's benefits to that. But by having kids, life is not getting better or worse, it's just getting different, right? And you move on to the next chapter. A book only is really good when it has good multiple chapters. So if you had a good single chapter, alhamdulillah, you can finish it up and you can start your marriage chapter. And if you're already married, maybe after, when you're ready, you can have children, inshallah, and start the family chapter, etc., right? So view it as positive, and then when you get married, make sure that when people ask you, because in the first like 17 years of your marriage, whenever you see someone, they're gonna be like, so, how's married life, right? It's like, okay, creepy guy, right? Just tell them, alhamdulillah, it's the best thing I ever did. Even if you just got into an argument with your husband about how he keeps leaving his socks on the floor when he comes home from work every day, and you're like, I told you, every day, take your socks, and he's like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I don't want to take my socks, right? Even if you just got into an argument, tell that friend it's the best thing I ever did. Because you know what? Generally speaking, it is the best thing you'll have ever done up until that point, and you shouldn't let a temporary argument taint someone's view of marriage for eternity, right? So be that positive force. That's one of the reasons why, if you follow me on social media, I'm very comfortable posting pictures of my wife and I on vacation. Obviously, appropriately, like obviously dressed and no PDA, things like that. But we're just like chilling. We're like at a beach, like hanging out, like eating sandwiches or something. Always food. It always comes back, right? Eating sandwiches, drinking coffee, or like I'll check in with my wife somewhere or whatever. I'm very comfortable because I want all the young Muslims that sort of like maybe for whatever unfortunate reason look up to me or follow me online to know that it's cool and it's fun and it's okay, right? And you can like it, right? And there are the people who call me out and they're like, brother, please cover your wife, please. I'm very attractive. I'm like, oh, okay, calm down, right? But I think that in this case, the good outweighs the bad, right? And you laugh, but they're serious. I've gotten emails, very, very creepy emails. My love protect me and my wife and everybody from creepy people. But yes, I think that it's important to give off a positive image of marriage.
Jazakallah khair. Kind of related question. What's the best advice for young Muslims looking to get married? How do they go about it?
MSA, next question. I'm being serious. You have to, did you get married to the MSA?
No, I did not.
Oh, okay.
No. Well, I'm from Houston, not from West Lafayette.
Oh, okay. Nice. Interesting.
Family friends.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of different ways.
Mutual friends.
Your family's going to have different paths.
I think it's kind of indirectly relates to MSA.
Kind of, sort of. Okay, maybe. No. I don't know. You were probably involved in the MSA at some point in your life. I think that everyone's family is going to have different pathways. So, like, some people might, they might be really popular in the community and have different outlets. I'm a big fan of the MSA because I think that it automatically shows you the baseline for someone's like someone's life purpose to some degree. Like if someone can take time out to dedicate to being part of a student organization and really being involved, then it shows you that they value that thing, right? Now, I'm not saying come to MSA to get married. It's not the Muslim Singles Association, right? It's the Muslim Students Association. But what I'm saying is,
you're helping attendance at our meetings.
We have to, do coffee, donuts, and rishtas. I don't know what else. What you have to do is you have to basically increase. A lot of people complain about not being able to meet somebody. Anyone ever heard that? Yeah. I just want a nice guy, and then I present a nice guy. No, not that kind of guy. You piggy. Anyways, a lot of people complain, I can't meet somebody, right? You have to increase your opportunities of intersection with people. Like, sitting at home and playing Call of Duty, you're probably not going to meet the perfect woman, right? Oh my god, she killed me like 7 times in 1 round. I need to find her wali, right? Like, that's not how it's going to work. You need to intersect, right? So that means like getting involved, and that shouldn't be your niyyah, but it's okay for part of your niyyah to be that you want to find a righteous person to be with. That's totally okay. Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to say that, after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she used to foster young girls, like orphans. She used to foster them. And then when they were of marriageable age, when she would go to the marketplace, she would take them with her. And she said, for the purpose that maybe they can come with me. Obviously, they're kind of like my foster daughters, but maybe someone might see them and be like, that girl looks nice. Like, she looks like a nice girl, and she's raised by Aisha. Wow, maybe my son would like to marry her. So there's nothing wrong with that being an intention, especially with the fitna today, honestly. Especially with the difficulty in fitna today, dude. Part of your intention of wanting to get married is not a bad intention. But I think that you need to find a balance between going in there only seeking that and also like completely neglecting all those opportunities, right? So increase your paths of intersection. My wife and I got married out of similar interest. One of my best friends, alhamdulillah, got married because he and his wife used to volunteer for the same relief organization, and they used to work together. And then boom, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the precedent's there. He used to work for Khadija, right? He used to work for her. She saw through his quality and his work ethic and his values and his loyalty and integrity that she admired him and appreciated him. And she sent Maisara, right, her servant, to go ask him. So the precedent is in the Sunnah that it's okay when you intersect with somebody socially to propose or to see, right? Now, based on that, I wouldn't just go be like, hey, I saw you at the MSA meeting last week. Like, do you want to get married tomorrow? Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I would be smart about it. I would sort of try to play it smart and be like, what do you think? You know,
some advice.
Maybe ask. Yeah, I would ask a third party, and that way it doesn't look weird for you. But the way that I do it is that whenever anyone likes somebody and wants to get married, I say, okay, let me act like it's my idea, and I'll go to that person. So, for example, my friend wanted to get married to this. I'll tell you, my friend Faiz wanted to marry this girl Maryam in Dallas, and they got married because of that. They have a kid now, mashallah.
Well, Faisal Osman.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So I hooked them up, mashallah. So I hooked them up, mashallah. So the way I did it was, he was like, yeah, I like Maryam. And I was like, okay, let me do something. I was like, Mahreen, my wife, I called her, I was like, Mahreen, can you text Maryam and be like, hey, I had an idea. Have you ever thought about Faiz Osman? You know that, you do that tone. Have you ever thought about Faiz Osman? And when Maryam was like, yeah, that's actually an interesting proposition. Then my wife was like, yeah, you know, other men and I were talking, he's a really good guy, like maybe you guys would work out. That way, if she said no, he wouldn't he wouldn't be held like hecka embarrassed, right? And she wouldn't feel really awkward. We kind of acted like a false intermediary so that we could kind of set it up without people's feelings being at stake, or at least their like honor, right? That's the best way to do it. I wouldn't message the person directly. I would try to find out through a mutual source, because if they say yes, then move forward, right? Get a hold of the parents, get a hold of whoever, find out for compatibility, all that jazz. Move forward. It's a process, but it's fine. But if they say no, then no harm, no foul, inshallah. Right? So.
Kind of general question. I may have already touched upon this from the sisters. How do you support the sisters in your life struggling to be successful in society? Family members, your wife, etc. How do you provide that support as a family member, someone's daughter, someone's sister? How do you support them?
I mean, this all comes down to what the person defines as their definition of success and their goals, and basically just aligning yourself to be a support in that regard. So my wife, for example, she's getting her master's, and I support her by, you know, obviously giving her encouragement, paying for the master's degree, which is like, I don't see it as like a gift. It's like my responsibility. But I mean, and for example, like when she gets her master's, she works as well. And I know a lot of people that their expectations of a marriage is like very domestic, like in the sense that the wife should stay at home and cook and make sure the house is taken care of. And that's not at all a dishonorable thing. You know, if someone chooses to have that lifestyle, that's wonderful, right? Whatever the couple decides is wonderful, as long as it's within the Sharia. We cannot say that one is better than the other, right? Khadija radiallahu anha was a working woman. You know, the other wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha radiallahu anha was a homemaker, right? So we have both examples. So we can't dog on one and be like, no, women should stay at home all the time. That's not accurate according to the Sunnah. However, we also can't say that women should work, because that's also not accurate according to the Sunnah. It's different based on different circumstances. Okay, so my wife, for example, is getting her master's. She works full time. That requires that I take on a lot of responsibilities that maybe some marriages are not used to. For example, like I cook basically 6 days a week now, right? I've gotten really good at it, mashallah. The crock pot. It's like, what's tonight? Chili night. Tomorrow's turkey chili, then veggie chili. So anyways, no, alhamdulillah, she's taught me a little bit. She's taught me how to cook a little bit. She knows, she's got mad skills in the kitchen. So I support her in that regard. You know, she loves cooking. She would love to, you know, carry on her mom's, you know, recipes and the tradition of the family and things like that. But at this point in time in our relationship, she's got responsibilities. She's trying to achieve different goals, and you know, my schedule's a little more flexible. Now, when perhaps she's done with her master's and maybe I might go try to get my PhD or whatever, then she's going to be really supportive. You know, then she's going to kind of step in, and maybe she might have to, you know, I don't know, like she might have to help out with different things that I would normally do at home, right? So she might have to drop off things or pick up things that I need from different places just to support me. So I think there's no universal answer for support. I think the biggest thing for support is communication. What are the expectations? What are the needs? And where can you help fulfill those needs where the person might be struggling? So if you have a daughter or a mother or a sister or a wife who has different goals and has different aspirations, and they have to fulfill X, Y, Z, see which one of those you can be a part of in terms of helping serve that cause. And then obviously marriage is a team effort. And so you have to come up with that plan together, right? You have to come up with that plan together. And later on in life, the tables might turn. You might have different aspirations and goals, and your wife might have the ability and the bandwidth to help you in those, and she would help you in those, right? Being flexible is key. Being flexible is key.
Okay. One related question for couples who, when we talk about this, is couples who are both studying, both students at Purdue, both doing a graduate degree or something, and balancing the lifestyle of that, and making time for their marriage and their own personal goals at the same time. What advice would you have for students at Purdue?
So I think that one thing is to prioritize what are needs and wants in your life. So you might want to play FIFA, but is it a need, right? You might want to watch, Scandal. I don't know why, that show's horrible. But is it a need, right? You might want to do this. You might want to hang out with your friends. I think that you need to separate between wants and needs. Whenever you engage in, so when you're single, you have your schedule, your life, your priorities. Whenever you add a completely new set of schedule, life priorities, you have to be able to find where they overlap, and you have to be able to negotiate the sort of differences. Like, that's just part of any relationship, right? So marriage is very important in the sense that you live with that person, so it's actually even more important. It's actually even more overlap, more intertwined. So my advice to the people would be set a static date during the week. Set a static meal. If it can be every night, that's wonderful. If you can have dinner every night together, awesome. Have dinner together as much as you can, right? And also, I would say this too, is that in a marriage, like, the small things really add up. So, for example, and I'm not doing this to like, I wake up early because our kitten won't let me sleep anymore. Because I don't know if any of you have kittens or cats. This thing is like the best Fajr alarm clock ever. Like, I don't think I've even been close to being late for Fajr since we got Sherlock, right? This cat is like amazing, right? We're gonna buy a Watson, inshallah, soon. But anyways, he literally, I have a picture, I'll put it up online soon, where I'm sleeping on my side, okay, like on my right side, and he's just chilling on my shoulder, looking at my face, and he's just waiting for 6 o'clock to hit. It's some sort of weird biological clock. When 6 o'clock hits, this cat goes nuts. Like, literally just starts like nuzzling my face. He's purring, his nose is freaking wet. I basically make wudu by the time I wake up. So he's like pushing in my face, and I just, so point of the story is I'm awake. Now my wife is getting ready for school. She's a teacher, getting ready for school. So I'm already awake, and I'm just kind of like, it's not a big deal. Like, I can make her breakfast, right? Like, it's not a big deal. I'm going to make myself coffee anyways. I go put in my thing to make my coffee, and then I just, like, put some toast, slice up some bananas and some Nutella. Boom, it's waiting for her, right? It was an investment of maybe 3 minutes of my life, but for her, it changed a lot about her day, right? The fact that her husband made her breakfast, right? So those small things add up. She'll come home, for example, I'll come home from a long day, counseling, teaching, et cetera, and I'll find that, like, she brought home, like, this, they brought some things to work, like, they brought some snacks, like, teachers always bring food to work, and she brought home a plate for me, right, and I'm so hungry, and, like, while she's, like, preparing dinner or whatever, there's, like, that little plate of snacks for me, like samosas or something. So just the thought of her remembering me at work and bringing a plate, like, that really means a lot to me. It took 3 minutes for her to think of that, but, you know what I'm saying? So in marriages, I would say have a consistent date night, hang out, etc., but then also never, ever forget the small stuff. The details really hold things together. If a marriage is made of bricks, right, like, like bricks, you guys know what bricks are? If a marriage is made of bricks, right, what's the important part about bricks? About a brick wall? Flat foundation, but then what else? The what? The mortar, right? What happens if you stack a wall of bricks with no mortar? Huh? It'll fall. At the lightest force, it'll fall. So if I take a bunch of bricks, right? If I have a bunch of, like, bricks in my relationship with my wife, like, really, like, solid milestones, like bricks. Oh, like, we first vacation, the honeymoon, et cetera. I've seen a lot of marriages where all that's been there and it's failed. Why? Because they don't put mortar in between those milestones. The mortar, the thing that holds it together, are those small details that the husband and wife don't forget about each other. Like making breakfast quickly for one another, bringing home samosas, vacuuming. You know, my wife, she hates coming home to a bed that's unmade. Do you guys need your bed made? Is that like a thing? Well, yeah. Do you guys need your bed made? No, I actually find my bed more comfortable when it's not made, right? I'm like, yeah, jump back in, right? It's like a warm pool. It's like, like, you know, it's like you don't. But for my wife, she's like, it needs to be made. So I take a minute out of my day and I make it, right? Those are the little bits of mortar. You can stack a wall super high of bricks and milestones of marriage, but at the first force, if a little kid bumps into it, boom, it falls down. What holds a foundation or a wall together is actually the mortar, the details keeps that thing stuck together, inshallah. So don't overlook that. And that's for every relationship, including your relationship with Allah, including your relationship with the Prophet.
Yeah. That's great, great answers. We had one question, I'm trying to find it. Okay, the sister side. Jazakumullah khair for coming. What are some other sources where Muslim sisters or Muslim brothers can get similar type of access to Muslim counselors and ask other similar type of questions?
I think like local community is number one. You guys live, mashallah, near a big metro, Indianapolis, so I'm sure that ISNA has some sort of outlet. If you do research, you might find something. But really, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of things out there. If you look at Muslim mental health journals and stuff like that, I don't know if there's a huge resource of like Muslim mental health professionals that are just kind of like ready and available. Like we're not that developed yet. We are getting there. I know that Qalam Institute, inshallah, the organization that I work with Sheikh Abdel Nasser, we're trying to start a sort of, a triaging of counseling, sort of like just like a basic level service, inshallah, once a week. We're going to start doing a podcast on mental health and relationships and things like that. These things are all coming out, but I think, you know, besides the current resources that you have, there's nothing wrong with going to see a non-Muslim therapist at all. In fact, part of our training in our master's programs is in cross-cultural diversity and sensitivity. And so therapists are prepared and ready to learn more about your culture, your beliefs, and implement those things into their advice and into their discussions with you. So I would say number one is that the Muslim community has some, seek them out. Also be patient, we're developing them. And then the last one is non-Muslim therapists are also wonderful professionals and they can provide a lot of help as well. Yeah.
Are there any other Muslim organizations, I know like ICNA or some other helplines or hotlines, do you suggest or do you know of any?
Yeah, ICNA is one of them. I personally have not experienced any of them. I've always just sought out professional relationships. So I can give you like, we're trying to create a database of Muslim therapists who will open up Skype accounts and will do counseling over Skype because that's actually a thing now. Like a lot of counseling is done over the internet. And so we're trying to create a database of at least like 20 to 30 nationwide that can have specific office hours and charge nominal rates. A lot of them take insurance as well. So, these things will be there, inshallah. We're working on it. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see just this huge exponential growth of mental health resources just because it's becoming more and more sort of aware and less of a stigma with it. So.
All right, I'd like to request everyone, if you have questions, keep them coming in. We're nearing the end of the barrel, so if you have don't wait till after the talk to pull AbdelRahman Murphy aside and ask him your dying personal question. Now is your time to write them down and pass them on over. Raise your hand, Maz, and the sister side as well. From the brothers, when considering marrying a Catholic or Christian, anything to watch out for?
Yes.
Advice.
Yeah, I think that in any relationship, values are huge, and if someone is a devout practitioner of another faith, obviously people of the book, for brothers, then you really have to be careful with a lot of things, and I think that because something is allowed in the religion does not necessarily mean it's the best choice to make, is my opinion on that. And I'm only saying this from personal experience. Like, I've met people, a lot of people have come to me for counseling after the fact, and they've actually decided not to have kids because they don't know what they're going to let the kids, what religion the kids should choose, etc. So there's just a lot of things that people don't think about in the long term. So I would say get premarital counseling with this person. Be honest with yourself about your own personal beliefs and commitment. and see where that takes you. But the red flags are obviously difference of values, difference of sort of expectations of what a marriage means religiously. Kids, family is a huge thing, and I would think that the person of the other faith would have similar concerns.
Yeah.
Right, I would think that as well. So it's important to communicate early, is what I'm saying. So.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. We're getting close to wrapping up. So if you have other dying questions, so file them through the system. Yeah, sure.
Hey, sorry for being probably a bit controversial now here.
Okay.
But one of my biggest questions always is how do we get to the how do we make up our thoughts? How do we come to the thoughts that shape our worldview, how we behave in society? And when it comes to Islam, I noticed that the Saudi perspective on Islam is very much saying there's one ruling or one sort of way of looking at the sources, of looking at the Quran, of looking at Hadith, and we just need to be more knowledgeable in knowing all these sources. While modern Islamic discourse has very much opened this up and questioned these sources or opened up different interpretations. So when I go to these discussions like here now, it's often when you talk about your rulings, you often talk about, oh well, we should respect and be patient with the ones who don't follow the same rulings yet, because eventually they'll get there. Give them time, give them patience. But what if by my own personal intellectual pathway, I just cannot come to the same conclusion as you, but to a different theological mindset? Can we have diversity within our theological beliefs? Can we have beliefs that maybe we see each as right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like in the Islamic tradition, there is the idea that there is such a thing as difference of opinion, or ikhtilaf, that people have had valid differences of opinion, and they've had it in things that are vast, like legal opinions, even some theological opinions. There have had many differences, founded all in the tradition. So they're using the tradition as an anchor, and then based on that, now they're extrapolating different rulings. But, okay, so that is allowed, but there is a very detailed condition, and this is not set by one country or region or school of thought. This is universal. That is that a person's qualifications must be such that they can extrapolate rulings in the first place. If I walked into a college classroom and I didn't have a college degree, and I said, I want to teach this subject, and they would say, no, you can't. You don't have the qualifications. I would say, listen, that's your method. That's postmodern Western academia. You're setting these conditions. I don't acknowledge your conditions. I've come to this subject on my own intellectual discourse, my own exploration. I want to be able to teach it according to my experiences. They would say, please leave, right? They would say, you're not qualified. Go get qualified and then apply for a position, right? So in the academy, in this university that we sit in, there is such a thing as conditions, qualifications, training, right? Certification. These are all things. What is a PhD thesis besides that whole process? You have to write under the mentorship of an advisor, a sheikh, so to speak. Then you write that process. Then you have to defend it in front of a board of people, right? Who are known as like scholars of that subject. So when it comes to establishing valid difference of opinion, in Islam we find that that's there, but only to people who have sought out the course of study that allows them to come to those differences. That's why you find, for example, the 4 legal schools of opinion. Those 4 people, the 4 imams who were there, you find, and there's, I mean, did you say 5? Right, so you said, yeah, I mean, there's more, actually, there's much more than 5, but really the 4 that lasted, right? The 4 that really lasted until today. The reason why they're taken so seriously is because each of them have decades of qualifications and conditions that they've met and experienced that give them the ability to make those extrapolations and to do what is known as ijtihad, which is seeking out this newness or this different extrapolation, different interpretation. If a person doesn't have those qualifications, then their integrity and their academic veracity must be questioned, right? Just like in the Purdue University, they wouldn't hire somebody who didn't have the qualifications, right? So in Islam, why is it any different? Like, I don't think being Muslim is enough of a qualification to have a difference in a theological, right? Because do we even know how to understand the source material in its language? Like, if you want to teach a certain subject in the academy, in the university setting, you have to know that source material inside and out. If I want to teach biblical studies, right? I have to know Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Latin. I have to know all those things almost as well as I know English. And so when it comes to interpreting Quran and Sunnah, I have to know Arabic like as well as I know my own language, right? Because that's the source material's language. Now, some people might say, oh, that's a little bit biased, but that's just the way that it is. That's the way it is with physics. That's the way it is with math. That's the way it is with chemistry. You have to know the source material inside out, right? And then only once you've achieved that milestone of qualification can you then enter the arena now of extrapolating different rulings. And you have this today. You have scholars all across the world, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, America, South America, Arabia, Europe. There's a fatwa board in France, right? You have scholars from all across the world, but what's one thing they all have in common is that they respect one another because they've each traversed the path of credibility and qualification, right? And so it's there. It's definitely there. It's not, it's not like a papacy where the Pope is, chosen by divine. It's not like that. Anyone can get there, right? It's not limited. It's not an elitist group. It's a group of people who have dedicated and sacrificed and achieved that level. And so at one side, the answer to your question is yes. But the other side is, but we have to make sure. And I am not qualified to come up with those extrapolations. I personally am not. All the answers that I give to you, I'm relaying what I've learned from my teachers. But I'm not coming up with anything new. I'm not sort of like creating a new answer, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, the answer?
Yes.
So the new interpretation, things like that. The first question I would ask when I read about new interpretations of the Quran, new readings of the Quran, etc., the first question I would ask is, does the person even understand the language of the source material, right? And forget like the fact that it's Arabic and it's Quran. That question is a question that should be asked in any educational setting. That if anyone presents a new idea to a subject, that's wonderful. But you have to see, do they even understand the source material in its original setting? And that's a very important concept that we're sort of overlooking. I think oftentimes in the Muslim community, people sometimes tend to think that just being Muslim is enough of a qualification to have an interpretation on Islam. And that's not true, right? And it's not true with me or with them or anybody in this room. Like, just being Muslim allows us to have a relationship with Allah, but it doesn't allow us to sort of interpret what we feel should be the right or this way or that way. We have to gain our stripes. We have to go through an academic, rigorous course of study before we can then come up with those parameters. But I appreciate your question, though. Because I think it's important as well for people not to shut that door, right? Because a lot of people are like, no, this is how it is. This is how it's got to be. This is it, right? And that's not the way that Islam is. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the mujtahid will be rewarded twice if he's right, once if he or she is wrong, right? Meaning what? That ijtihad is actually part of this religion. Renewal, coming up with extrapolations for different circumstances. The source material might be static. Quran and Sunnah will not change. But the world we live in is dynamic. It's always changing. And so Islam has to be able to engage the world that we live in and come up with new ideas. For example, TV, when it first came out, was haram, right? Because scholars were like, this is magic. It's clearly black magic, right? Then the more we realized, no, it's just a transmission of images, right? They used to say that video, they used to say that pictures were, they used to say that video was okay, but pictures are haram. When video is nothing more than a lot of pictures, right? If you know how video works. Video is just a camera that takes a bunch of pictures and sets it into emotion. So the more that we learn about the world around us, the rulings will change. Cigarettes used to be completely permissible, right? Then they realized that it causes terrible diseases and it's directly related. It's not correlation, it's causation. And they said, okay, this goes against la darar wa la dirar. You can't harm yourself in Islam, so it's no longer permissible, right? The idea is that things change, but people who have earned those qualifications are the ones who can change those. And you and I can become those people, but we have to first traverse that path. Inshallah. Good question.
Related to the TV, question from the sisters. I feel inappropriate whenever I read stories or watch movies that have disturbing scenes, but my intentions are for the overall story. In today's media/TV shows are over half the time include scenes that are wrong. Is it bad if I continue to watch shows like Breaking Bad and Games of Thrones?
Oh, God. So I'll tell you something. I don't watch Game of Thrones because I personally believe that I just don't want to support that. I just think that it's just so overwhelmingly raunchy that I don't want to support that. I don't judge. Well, I do judge anyone who watches it, but I try not to judge people who watch it. But the point is that so Islamically speaking, if you know something is going to be haram and you watch it and you end up seeing something haram, then you're no longer innocent of that, right? Because you knew it was going to be there. if you try your best, if you're someone who tries their best, right, then the whole fiqh discussion can get, obviously you can figure out whatever answer you want from that, to be honest with you. What I would recommend is think about how these things affect your heart, right? Because there's taqwa and there's fatwa. Fatwa is oftentimes a lot lower than taqwa. Fatwa is like the base level, what you should follow, right? Taqwa is like what should you do better for yourself, right? And so if exposing yourself to these images and these words and these sort of like ideas and themes, my little sister-in-law is watching, what's it called? American Horror Story. This thing is like disturbing, dude. It's like every episode has sex and murder. That's literally the whole. And again, she's like, "Can I watch it? Is it okay?" I'm like, she's like, I turn off all the Quran parts, and I'm like, I'm not gonna. I don't want to be that guy. But I'm like, think about what this is doing for your worldview. And I know that everyone tries to argue that there are studies that show that violent video games have no correlation at all to the violence in society. But dude, I'm telling you, from a mental health perspective, that cannot be the case, right? Desensitization is a real thing. Okay, when you watch something over and over and over, or you play something over and over and over again, chances are you will no longer be as sensitive to that thing as you were before. It's common. When you eat the same food over and over and over again, it no longer tastes as good as it was the first time. And so my recommendation to you as an older brother, I'm not a mufti, I can't give you fatwa. My recommendation is just to watch what you consume. Watch what you eat, watch what you look at, and watch what you listen to. Just watch what you consume, because all those things will have an effect on you. I think inshallah, everyone's kind of looking like they're zoned out a little bit. So.
Yeah, we're gonna end at 9, for sure. So we're gonna go rapid fire, one by one. Finish out the last clip. And that's it. What is the Islamic way to improve concentration, beat the evil eye in relationships, and develop self-esteem?
I thought you said rapid fire.
Beat the evil eye.
Beat the evil eye. I mean, nothing can harm you unless Allah allows it to harm you, and Allah will only allow it to harm you if you don't lock your doors. Right. So, do the adhkar al-sabah, adhkar al-masa, do the dhikr of the morning, the dhikr of the evening, pray your salah on time. The way that I make this out to be to people to understand is that if you don't do these things, you're leaving your door unlocked. And when you leave your door unlocked, someone might break in, they might not break in, right? So you're not guaranteeing yourself a break-in, but you're also not guaranteeing yourself a good chance of safety, okay? So by doing these things, by praying 5 times a day, by doing your adhkar, you're locking your door at night, right? You're ensuring near complete safety for yourself.
All right, and developing self-esteem. What do you think?
Developing self-esteem, just appreciate what you do and appreciate just as much as you focus on your deficiencies, you can focus on your successes and appreciate yourself, inshallah, and hang around people who are positive. Don't hang around negative Nancy's.
Okay.
Or neithers.
How do we encourage parents to support interracial marriages? How do we do that?
Through conversation, and give your parents time and be patient with them and just kind of chip away at it. It's not going to happen overnight. Yeah, but you just got to be patient, loving, and just give them time and keep talking about it. Call in intermediaries who your parents respect and trust, but also who understand your situation. Uncles, aunties, etc.
Okay. Muslims criticize each other a lot, and it sometimes keeps me from putting myself out there and getting involved with Muslim organizations. How can I develop a thick skin to deal with this, or how can this change?
Lead with the values that you want to see in community, and others will follow. Don't run away because of something that you don't like. Just lead with that. Lead with whatever positivity and the values you want to see, and other people will come out of the woodwork and they'll follow you.
Okay. Just questions we've already answered a little bit.
We had a question here.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, can you please comment a little bit about divisions that I sometimes see, just like in the mosque? There is a division for the men's sphere and women's sphere, and I've asked this question multiple times, and I get some answers, but I feel like I need more information about it. And for example, I come from a culture where men and women are not separated like in this room, and I respect that, but I just don't understand why that is so. And if you can explain again, why is it, for example, mandatory for females to dress up a certain way and not for males to dress up a certain way? If they're, it just, I mean, and again, I might coming from a background where I don't have religious education, right? I do believe in certain things, but I'd like to know more information about it that is more grounded in certain, more justifiable to me answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, why is it mandatory for females? Well, why is it mandatory for males to come to the Jumu'ah prayer? Because some people tell me that there is a special union for man, community, and why is it not mandatory for women? So how do they then see that communion, spirituality, strengthening their faith if it's not mandatory for them? If they have other, for example, duties that's how I was explaining, taking care of children, etc. Why not create daycares for children while females can also, go to the masjid and do those things and also strengthen their man? It's just all those questions, and I think the key is the division that I see. It might not be division; it might be something else that I just don't understand quite yet. So if we can comment on those things, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think that if we look at the authentic sources, we find that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his masjid never had a division, never had a barrier, actually. The barrier in his masjid was children, so this little guy, right? So it'd be men, children, and women. And we know this is true, and the barrier actually was introduced later on. We know this from one hadith of a young man who was praying, and he said there was a beautiful woman who used to pray behind them, and he used to, when he was in ruku', he used to look between his legs so that he could see her face, because she was so beautiful, right? So that shows us there was no wall, okay? That's something that I think is very important, actually. And I personally am a fan. I believe in the system of being, providing equal space for men and women. I think that's just, I don't think that should be up for debate. I think it should be one of those things. Now, what do we mean by equal space? Do we mean that men and women pray intermingled, that they pray like one man, one woman, one man, one woman? Do we mean they pray side by side, front and back? There are different methods of prayer, and a lot of them are dictated purely by space, to be honest with you. A lot of them are dictated purely by the makeup of the building. So for example, we prayed women over there, men in here, not because of any sort of misogyny, but because that was just the most easy way to perform the prayer with the given amount of people that we had, right? We would have had to move all the tables and then, set everything back up afterwards. And so meanwhile, we just separated the two. I don't think that there was an intention to sort of like separate men and women for prayer. In fact, I think that knowing the organizer, I feel like he would have wanted everyone to pray together, men and women, had we had the space to do so. That being said, I think that culture manifests misogyny in a lot of ways, and it uses religion as a pedestal and as a rationalization for that misogyny, which is actually sometimes wrong. But we cannot confuse culture with religion. That's one thing we have to be very careful of. So, for example, a lot of people would say that it's the man's duty to work and the woman's duty to stay at home. Have you heard that before? So, and they'll religiously justify this. They'll say like, it's the man's duty to work, the woman's duty to stay at home. My argument back to them is that Khadija radiallahu anha was actually the employer of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what would you say about that, right? How would you then talk about that? What we find in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a vast adaptability for all different kinds of personalities. We find some people who want to just stay at home, they don't want to work. We find some people who do want to work. We find some people who want to do this and that. There's different flavors, basically. And that's why the Prophet's Sunnah is so vast. It allows for different kinds of lifestyles that all fall within the Sharia. That's the key, is that it falls within the Sharia. So if the Sharia is a fence, okay, you can go anywhere in the field in the middle of that fence. A lot of people hang on to the fence because they don't want to stray away from it. But really, you can go anywhere in the middle, right? You can go anywhere in the middle as long as you're within that fence. But it's dangerous for us to try to explore if we don't know where the fence is, right? So first, before we start having discussions about what is this, what is it, we do have to gain a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding of the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then we can start to have discussions and engage why things are the way they are, right? The other question I think that you asked, the Jummah, that's actually a very good question. There actually have been scholars who have said that in Western countries where educational opportunities for women are not nearly as much as they are in other parts of the world where there are a lot of Muslims, that it actually is a strong recommendation. Now, they can't make it obligatory, right? Scholars cannot make obligatory what Allah did not make obligatory. But they said that they strongly recommend that women go and attend the Jummah prayer because it is, like what you said, an educational and spiritually communal source of an experience. right? And so that's why in the first place masajid are focusing on providing great experiences for women at the masjid, because they arguably, in my opinion, are the more important of all communities, not just because they're mothers, not just because they're children, but because that, in my opinion, they shape the culture of society, right? The word ummah comes from the same root word as which means mother, right? So if we don't have righteous women, we're not going to have a righteous community. And so, in my opinion, like the equal opportunity for spiritual engagement is definitely necessary. Now, why does the religion say things, for example, like women should dress a certain way, men dress different ways? The religion has different expectations for each gender because the religion views genders as being different, right? Men should have to cover a certain amount as well. A lot of what men wear, for example, is actually not following the best practice of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, where they wear shirts that are like super tight, etc., etc. It's not necessarily like a condemnable sin, but it's not the best way to wear their clothes. However, in Islam, men have certain expectations that women don't have. For example, the mahr, right? When a couple gets married, the woman is owed a gift of any measure that she wants, and the man has to give it to her, right? And so I could argue that this is unfair on men. Why don't I get a gift? I want a gift too, right? But in reality, that's just a responsibility that men have that women don't have. And a lot of these responsibilities do reflect culture, but at the same time, they don't necessarily reflect universals. And so women are not always universally having to be at home, but there are some functions of motherhood that men can simply not provide, right? Like physiologically, men cannot feed children, right? It's just not possible. Then you might argue like, okay, well there's formula now, there's different methods to feed kids, there's pumps and things like that. But the reality is that back in those days, and these things only came about in the last, like, what, 60 years, 70 years? So up until this point, this has never been a question, that babies needed the nourishment and nurturing of mothers physiologically. Forget emotionally, forget all that. Forget all the data that shows that the mother and emotions are built by the relationship with the mother, right? But just physiologically. So there are certain requirements, definitely. My argument would be that we oftentimes focus on the requirements of women and not on the requirements of men. We tend to kind of like highlight those a lot. I would agree with you, though, that the community has a way of culturally manifesting misogyny and sort of like being almost treating women as second-class citizens. That's no secret in the Muslim community. I think that people like myself and like my teachers are sort of combating this. I mean, I have 3 sisters, a wife, and inshallah, I pray to have a daughter. Like, I really want to have a daughter because girls are just adorable. My teacher, mashallah, has 2 daughters. We always talk about how we're so afraid that we're going to have to explain one day to our kids, if they're daughters, you know, why women are sometimes treated like second-class citizens in the masjid, and how we don't agree with that, but we're slowly trying to change the process. So my answer to you is a little bit of everything. We have to learn more about the religion in order to properly understand it. The second thing is that if we focus on one side of the equation, we're always going to feel imbalanced, right? And the third is, yes, the misogyny that you are seeing and feeling, maybe it does exist, and we are doing our best to fight it. For example, like saying that women don't have to come to the masjid. How does that manifest itself? Sometimes they don't build a prayer space for women at the masjid. There have been masajid that I've seen in England where they don't build a prayer space for women. Why? Because it's not mandatory for them to go. I was supposed to give a talk at one of the masajid. When I found that out, I canceled the talk. You guys said, if you don't give a space for women, like, I don't want to come and endorse an institution that doesn't care for half of the community, right? And actually, at one of the MSAs that I spoke at in England, there was like a couple hundred brothers who showed up, and there was like 600 girls who showed up. And so the girls got to sit in the live room, and the guys had to go sit in the satellite room with the microphone. And they all came out. All the guys came out because there were just more girls. Like I was like, look, you brothers are weak. Like, I'm sorry, right? So when the guys came out of the room with the satellite speaker and microphone, they all came out like ghost-faced. Not Ghostface Killer, just Ghostface. And they were like, we're never going to do that to girls ever again. They're like, that talk was so annoying, and it was so frustrating. The mic kept cutting out. You know, you obviously were telling jokes with your facial expressions. We couldn't hear them, but we could hear you all laughing. It was like not being invited to a party, but hearing everything at the party, right? So they actually said, they were like, we're never going to do that again. And subhanAllah, I went back the next year to the same, the ISOC, they call it an ISOC, MSA, and they got a bigger room so everybody could sit together. So I think people are learning. I think honestly the community is learning. And I think that we live in a world that is ubiquitous with male privilege. And we have to be able to understand that while certain people are taking advantage of that privilege and they're blind to that privilege, there are certain men who are seriously trying to fight it at a very like serious level, right? Sheikh Abdel Nasser and I have been called out many times by a lot of very traditional Muslims for being too liberal. Why? Because we try to support the feminist, not feminist in terms of like the hyper-aggressive feminist, but as a philosophy that both genders should be treated equally, socially, spiritually, economically, right? We've been called out by people for that. We've been actually even, what do they call it, like sanctioned by certain groups. They've rescinded invitations to us because we said we wanted guys and girls to sit side by side, right? So I said, we don't want you coming to our conference anymore, right? So there are people who are trying to fight that, but it's going to take time. We're fighting like decades of misogyny, right? So, but I would ask, and everyone in this room, to really, before we start to have like critical analysis of certain things in the religion, we have to start seeking knowledge at a very source level. And asking questions is a great way to start that process, right? But I would say if you want to learn more about like why, Sheikh Abdel Nasser teaches this class called Firm Ground, and I think he deals with a lot of these questions. I can, inshallah, try to provide some source material for you guys that you guys can read and some explanations. But yeah, okay, let me give you an example. Have you guys ever heard the verse that says, وَضْرِبُهُنَّ? You ever heard that? The famous verse is talking about discord in a marriage, and the final step, Allah says, وَضْرِبُهُنَّ, and it's been translated famously as what? Huh? Beat them. So it's talking to the husbands, and it's saying, if you've gone through all these steps, then strike them, right? This is how it's translated, okay? And you find that a lot of cultures translate it like this. Why? Not because the religion says that, but because even the non-Muslims in these cultures hit their women. So it's not a religiously ordained thing, it's a cultural thing. But what's interesting is that if you look at Imam Nawawi, who's one of the foundational scholars in our tradition, right? One of the foundational scholars of Quranic understanding and understanding of Sunnah, number one, you find that the Prophet ﷺ never hit a woman. And the Quran and the Sunnah have to be complementary. This is part of the Aqeedah of a Muslim. That the Quran and the Sunnah cannot be contradictory, okay? Number two is that Imam Nawawi himself says that darb in the Arabic language can mean three different things. It can mean hit. It can also mean to provide a profound example. Allah says, darab Allahu mathal. Allah strikes you with an example. Have you ever heard someone say, it hit me like a ton of bricks? Did a ton of bricks actually hit them? Exactly, it did not, right? So in the Quran, Allah uses that same word for hit as what? A profound realization. Mind blown, right? So what? That means that when you come to the final step of your discord in your marriage, then try to give them a profound realization. Don't hit them, right? Then Imam Nawawi takes it even further. And he says, darab can be somebody who travels. So he says, what? If you come into a fight with your spouse, give each other some space. But why was only the first interpretation ever taught? Someone had an agenda somewhere, right? So the point is that when you learn more about the sources, classical sources, you study Arabic, your eyes start to open to these realities, right? And now these questions that people have been asking me for years, they said, why is it okay to hit women in your religion? I never knew the answer. I was like, I don't think it is. It doesn't sit well with me, right? The Prophet ﷺ never did that. The more I went and researched it under qualified scholarship, Sheikh Abdel Nasser, Imam Suhaib Webb, my teachers, the more I researched it and studied it, then I came upon these beautiful explanations that are found in our classical sources. This is not me trying to pull rulings from here, and trying to make it all work. I'm trying to MacGyver the situation, like, give me a toothpick, give me some bubble gum. Like, I'm not trying to, like, fix it. This is, like, firmly founded in our religion, that it doesn't mean hit. It can mean other things. And if it doesn't mean hit, and the Prophet never hit, then in this scenario, it definitely does not mean hit. Right? And this is the first time that this is being said. How scary is that? That there are thousands upon thousands of translations out there that say strike them. That's scary to me, right? So the idea is that we have to really seek more knowledge. The more we seek more knowledge, the more things become clear. Inshallah. Thank you so much.
It's up to you. That we made it all the way to the end, but there's one last question. If you want to answer in 20 seconds, you can.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's an important question. How can you cope with a problem as a teenager without telling your parents?
contacts.
think it's so
Trying
nice.
to tell us slightly.
Yeah.
How do you cope with a problem as a teenager without telling your parents?
Oh,
30 seconds on this.
good friends, good support, mentors and MSA members that you look up to,
I'm gonna say yeah, for
right?
sure.
I think
Youth
just
groups here.
finding all, basically you need to come up with a system of support, and your parents are definitely a foundational part of that system, but you can also have other parts you can rely on.
Older brothers, older cousins,
Absolutely.
for sure. I want to thank especially Ustad AbdelRahman Murphy. It was a really beneficial talk. Thank Abdullah. And we have helped us benefit from. And thank you for the audience for asking good questions and participating. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.